The story begins with the great general of the northern heavens, Manhua Yun, who managed, thanks to his exceptional combat skills, to bring political chaos in the country under control. After stabilizing the situation, Yun crowned Yuji Uraim as the new emperor of the nation. He also appointed 6 experts who had shared life-and-death battles with him as kings to aid the new emperor in governing the country. In a turbulent atmosphere, violent winds blew accompanied by loud explosions, and amid the bloody battlefield, a body was seen falling from above toward the ground at tremendous speed. General Yun appeared severely wounded, lying on the ground and bleeding heavily. Yun sat up in pain, groaning from the injuries he had suffered. In a moment of shock, Yun felt a strange movement around him that made him turn quickly. He found himself surrounded by figures approaching from the hills under the moonlight. Yun was stunned to see the 6 kings he had appointed surrounding him and accused them of betrayal, denouncing what they had done. One of them, the Sword King, approached and asked Yun to surrender peacefully, telling him that his time was over. Yun responded angrily, shouting and questioning how the Sword King could forget all that had once existed between them. Yun began introducing himself again, reminding him of his stature, but stopped abruptly due to the severe pain. He was shocked to see his leg amputated, but despite the intense pain and critical injuries, Yun tried to stand again, gathering what strength he had left. The Sword King mocked him, questioning what he could possibly do in such a terrible state, confirming that this was indeed his end. Nevertheless, Yun suddenly mustered his strength and launched a massive attack that shocked everyone with its incredible power. Everyone was astonished by his supernatural combat ability despite his severe wounds and weakened condition. One of the kings expressed his great surprise at this power, believing it impossible for Yun to possess such energy in that state. Yun declared with anger and resolve that he would not allow these traitors to get away with their actions, choosing to confront them all even if it meant dying with them. He vowed to show them his grand avatar dance, preparing for one final powerful strike. Then he announced that the time had come for the final dance of his avatars, ready to end this battle. One of the kings was filled with surprise and concern, wondering whether their power would truly be enough to defeat the great general, while the Sword King ordered the others to stop talking and prepare for battle. The Sword King admired Yun's overwhelming strength, acknowledging that he truly deserved the title of warlord. Yun's condition began to deteriorate further as blood flowed from his mouth due to the severity of his injuries. Even though he knew his body wouldn't last more than half an hour, Yun wondered if he could defeat the 6 powerful kings in such a short time. He urged himself to stay focused and not be distracted, affirming the necessity of taking down at least one of them, determined to fight until the end. In a moment of weakness and pain, he wished a loyal companion were by his side during this critical moment. But before he could finish that thought, he was struck hard by a weapon that pierced his body from behind, leaving him speechless. Yun screamed in agony as he struggled to fight back again. His opponent was amazed by Yun's strength and unwavering will, how he managed to endure an attack equivalent to the power of 3,000 explosives, even with a severed leg. At that moment, Yun heard a sudden voice behind him, which left him shocked and wondering who the owner of that voice could be, unable to believe what he had just heard. Uraim appeared calmly and spoke coldly, saying that, as expected, he could not allow his brother Yun to remain alive. The wounded Yun looked at Uraim with deep pain and shock, uttering his name with great difficulty. Yun collapsed hard onto the ground amid his many wounds, in disbelief even at Uraim's betrayal. Uraim approached him as he lay on the ground and told him, with coldness and confidence, that the true ruler of this world was none other than himself, Emperor Uraim, but above the emperor stood a higher lord. He stood and declared that Manhua Yun had been the great martial arts master, but now that his legacy had ended, he himself had become the true emperor. Uraim smiled as he confirmed that with Yun's fall, he had now truly become the emperor. Yun, still lying on the ground, asked Uraim in shock and deep pain why he was doing this and how he could. Uraim approached him holding his sword and said in a calm, mocking tone that Yun seemed to be in great pain and sarcastically promised to ease that pain quickly. He then prepared to stab his brother Yun with the sword, ending his life while declaring with both pride and sorrow that his brother, the great general and god of martial arts, was now dead. Uraim looked at his brother's corpse coldly, describing him as his eternal rival. And as Yun drew his final breaths, he was overwhelmed by the injustice of being betrayed by those he had trusted, never imagining that even Uraim would betray him. Yun remained stunned and deeply wounded, both emotionally and physically, by the truth that Uraim, the one he had trusted most, had taken part in this betrayal. He tried desperately to speak Uraim's name one more time as he was dying. But suddenly, a mysterious blue light appeared from somewhere. Yun opened his eyes again to find himself in a strange, dark, and hot place, wondering about the mysterious location he was now in. He began to suspect that he might be in a place like purgatory due to the strange atmosphere around him. When he touched the ground with his hand, he suddenly realized he was in real water. Yun looked in astonishment at his reflection in the water, only to see a strange face he had not expected. Yun was overcome with shock, horrified as he wondered what was happening to him. His confusion deepened as he realized something impossible and illogical. Then Yun understood the shocking truth. The small body he was seeing, reflected in the water, was the body of a child. Yun couldn't bear or comprehend what was happening around him and wanted to know the truth immediately. But suddenly he became aware of voices coming from outside the place he was in. Two people were talking about carrying out cruel orders involving placing small children inside a large cauldron filled with burning fire. They expressed regret about the cruelty of the palace master, who ordered them to place the children alive into the burning pot. The two continued speaking about the cruelty of the merciless palace master, who even used his own child as medicine. Yun heard their conversation from inside and tried hard to find a way out of the strange place he was trapped in. But he was shocked to find a strange barrier preventing him from escaping. Yun fell back into the water after being forcefully repelled by the mysterious barrier. He realized that escaping this place with his current small body would be extremely difficult. Then Yun realized the truth about the place he was in. The hole in the ceiling and the surrounding shape resembled a giant cauldron. His shock deepened as he realized they were cooking children alive, and he kept wondering in disbelief if he was truly the child about to be cooked. At that moment, a bright light appeared, and a blue flower began to emerge through the opening at the top of the cauldron. Yun was stunned as he clearly saw the blue flower, immediately recognizing it as the deadly flame flower, which would be used in this cruel ritual. Outside, the two guards talked about the extreme heat and the power of the blue flower, which could melt bones. Meanwhile, inside, Yun struggled to stand amidst the intense heat. Yun began to feel suffocated and could no longer breathe properly, and his consciousness started to fade gradually. His vision darkened slowly, and he began to lose awareness due to the unbearable heat. But suddenly he heard a voice calling him by the name Hua Yun, which jolted him awake and restored his consciousness with force. The voice continued, now calling his true name Xianhua Yun, which made him turn in astonishment, wondering where the voice was coming from. Right before his eyes appeared someone familiar, his master, the one who raised and trained him. Yun couldn't believe his eyes and cried out in shock and yearning for his teacher. Yun asked his master how and why he was here, overwhelmed with disbelief. The master explained that the Great Avatar Dance, which Yun had mastered, was a dance born from fire. He clarified that the place Yun was now in, this burning cauldron, was the very stage where that dance was born. The master startled Yun by firmly asking him what he was doing right now. Then he gave him a clear and commanding order, to dance. Yun immediately obeyed his master's command and began the first movement of the dance. As he danced, he still didn't know why he had awakened in a child's body, but he was certain of one thing, that he would not allow himself to die like this while the traitors who betrayed him were still alive. In a crisis like this, the only thing he could rely on was what his master had left him. With confidence and determination, Yun began performing the Great Avatar Dance with all the strength he had. Outside, the two guards stood watching the intense and fiercely burning blue fire. One of them commented angrily that this act was unforgivable. From afar, an old man stepped out of a room and looked toward the burning cauldron with concern and silence. Suddenly, the fire blazed with a majestic green color, which greatly drew the old man's attention. The old man rushed forward when he saw the fire, shocked at the reappearance of the blue flower. The guards recognized him and said that this man was the doctor who had been responsible for the child for many years. The guards wondered among themselves what the doctor might be feeling as he watched the child he had cared for like a son now facing such a cruel fate. The doctor stood sorrowfully watching the harsh blue fire, commenting with grief that using the blue flower in such a brutal way was far too excessive. The elderly doctor stood still, silent and tense, his eyes full of worry and confusion at the strange scene unfolding before him. He suddenly noticed a strange sound and suspiciously asked the other what was happening now. He turned around cautiously and in astonishment, trying to discover the reason behind the guard's conversation. But he was soon utterly stunned as something unfamiliar manifested before his eyes. A mysterious green energy began to emerge gradually, transforming into the shape of a massive creature that looked like a mythical beast. The creature grew immensely in size until it was revealed to be a giant dragon roaring loudly and releasing an astonishing surge of energy. The doctor and those with him stood in awe, unable to explain the mysterious event they were witnessing. The doctor kept repeating to himself in great fear, wondering what was happening and what that creature truly was. Inside the giant cauldron, Yun continued his dance with flowing movements, immersed in the blue energy surging around him. He danced with growing confidence, his movements becoming more precise, which caused the surrounding energy to grow in strength and brilliance. The spirit of his master appeared before him, encouraging him and affirming that he had successfully performed the dance correctly. Yun felt a renewed excitement and deep confidence as he continued the dance, strengthened by his master's support. It felt as if his master's spirit was truly dancing with him, giving him a profound sense of power and peace. The two launched into a synchronized dance together, their energies blending in an extraordinary display within the cauldron. Yun and his master exchanged glances during the dance, and a proud smile appeared on the master's face as he watched his student. They continued dancing together with strength and intense focus as the blue energy around them blazed even more brightly. The energy inside the giant cauldron surged with immense force until the entire place began to shake. From outside, the guards noticed the overwhelming energy flow and backed away in sheer panic, screaming in terror. One of the guards insisted he had never seen anything like this in his 15 years of working there. He expressed fear that no one would believe him if he told them what he was witnessing, describing the scene as if a giant dragon had awakened to unleash chaos. The energy grew stronger, and the massive green dragon became more powerful and ferocious, moving through the air in fury. From afar, everyone watched in shock as the scene appeared like an enraged living dragon erupting within the burning energy. The elderly doctor continued watching in disbelief, completely stunned by what he saw. The giant cauldron began to crack violently, and the energy inside it spiraled out of control in a terrifying way. The guards suddenly realized that what was happening was the Great Avatar Dance, and one of them tried to warn the other and urged him to run immediately. The cauldron exploded with tremendous force, and the energy burst outward in all directions, devastating everything around. The doctor went into a state of shock, shielding his face with his arm to protect himself from the massive blast. After the explosion, smoke and dust filled the area, while the two guards crawled across the ground in pain and shock. At that moment, the doctor heard the sound of steady, confident footsteps approaching him through the smoke and dust. As the scene cleared, Yun appeared standing before him with confidence and strength, surrounded by the blue energy still flowing around his body, ready for the next step. After the dust settled, the elderly doctor approached anxiously, calling out to young Yun with a trembling voice. As he came closer, his face filled with both astonishment and relief when he saw that Yun was still alive. From within the smoke, the doctor saw Yun standing firmly, surrounded by a strong blue aura, whispering confidently that he had returned from the depths of death. Yun declared with strength and determination that he had come back once more. The doctor and the two guards approached Yun in shock, barely able to believe what had just happened before their eyes. But Yun suddenly began to feel overwhelming fatigue, and his body trembled from exhaustion. The doctor cried out in great concern, calling him young master, as he saw Yun collapse from the extreme fatigue. Yun was then taken to the treatment room, where the medical tools were neatly arranged and the atmosphere was calm and stable. The doctor sat beside Yun, closely observing his condition with clear worry and attentiveness. He examined Yun carefully and remarked in amazement that his condition was truly remarkable. The doctor explained that Yun was unconscious due to dehydration and severe exhaustion, even though his physical injuries were minor. He wondered how Yun's body had managed to endure the Great Avatar Dance amid such intense heat. At that moment, the two guards entered the room abruptly and informed the doctor that the palace master demanded his presence immediately. The doctor sat beside Yun, slightly hesitant, then softly said that he understood and would go now. He calmly told the guards that he was on his way out. A few moments after the doctor left, a mysterious figure dressed in black sneaked into the room. This person stood beside Yun, glaring at him with hostile and ominous eyes. Then he pulled out a small vial and poured a strange substance into Yun's mouth while he remained unconscious. After making sure Yun had swallowed the strange substance, the mysterious man quickly and cautiously left the room. Suddenly, Yun woke up in excruciating pain, screaming as agony tore through his body. Yun tried to resist, but his body continued to shake violently from the effect of the poison. The dark figure turned toward Yun and said with bitter malice that he should blame his wretched mother, as everything was happening according to the law of the sun. The doctor returned to the room, sighing wearily from the situation. Although he was relieved the palace had allowed him to treat Yun, he still did not fully understand the true intentions of the palace master. While the doctor was deep in thought, he was shocked to see Yun lying on the floor instead of in his bed. The doctor rushed toward Yun, calling out to him with great worry and urgency. Then he held Yun in his arms, calling to him in deep concern. The doctor then noticed a bloodstain coming from Yun's mouth and realized in shock that he had been poisoned. The doctor asked in astonishment whether it was truly poison that had been used. Despite his shock at the attempt to harm Yun this way, the doctor said with sorrow that the young master must be deeply hated, but that any poison could be treated like bitter medicine before the heart of the sun. The doctor declared firmly that he would need to prepare an antidote quickly and asked Yun to hold on until he returned. But the doctor was suddenly startled by something sharp touching his neck, which made him panic and feel intense fear and anxiety. He quickly discovered that it was Yun holding the sharp needle to his neck, and he was greatly surprised, calling out to him in a trembling voice as, "Young master." The doctor asked in astonishment if Yun had been awake the whole time, expressing admiration for his ability to completely conceal his presence. Yun then sternly ordered him to only answer questions and not to ask any. The doctor smiled calmly and said that this behavior was impressive, wondering whether Yun had always been like this or if the heart of the sun had changed him. He clearly declared his full readiness to answer anything Yun wanted to know. Yun was surprised by the doctor's reaction, who seemed unusually pleased by the confrontation. Yun also noticed that the doctor answered his questions easily, as if he had been eagerly waiting for this moment. Through their conversation, it became clear that Yun was in the Sun Palace, one of the 3 branches of the heavenly demon sect, and that he was the 4th young master of the palace, currently 15 years old. Yun learned that the master of the Sun Palace, his own father, had tried to create a miraculous elixir called the Divine Sun Pill, attempting to do so by boiling his son alive in medicinal herbs, which made him seem utterly insane. He also realized that his father wasn't the only one trying to kill him. There were also assassins hunting him. However, as a result of these events, Yun had obtained the Heart of the Sun, which had formed within him due to the liquid in the cauldron. According to the doctor, no poison could affect someone who possessed the Heart of the Sun. Yun could feel the heart of the sun beating slowly in his chest, large and hot, as if he had gained something incredible from the ordeal. In addition, Yun learned that the current year was Zhongshon 22, and that he had previously died in the year Zhongshon 7, meaning the 7 warlords responsible for his death were still alive. Although he had a burning desire for revenge, Yun realized that he was now in the body of a 15-year-old boy and that he needed allies. After a quick thought, Yun decided to drop the needle he had been threatening the doctor with onto the floor. Instead, he handed the doctor a handkerchief and said it would be more useful to him than the needle. The doctor smiled sarcastically and asked whether Yun had decided if he was a friend or foe, expressing admiration for his bravery. Yun immediately sensed a true killing intent coming from the doctor. Suddenly, the doctor launched a powerful attack on Yun, wielding another needle. Yun was taken aback by the sudden and unexpected assault. The doctor shouted with a sinister expression that Yun might have misjudged the situation this time. Yun felt worried and tense at the sharp needle that was now extremely close to his face. But the doctor, too, was surprised by Yun's stillness and the fact that he didn't attempt to avoid the attack at all. The needle got dangerously close to Yun's eye, yet he didn't flinch or show any fear. The doctor continued his fierce attack, but Yun remained completely steady and confident. The doctor wondered internally why Yun wasn't moving, assuming that Yun must not have expected him to actually stab him. Yun smiled calmly and said that he was certain the doctor wanted something from him, which is why he didn't try to dodge the attack. In return, the doctor also smiled quietly, accepting the situation with interest. The doctor began laughing loudly after seeing Yun's calm and confident reaction, praising him by saying he was extremely impressive. He then told Yun that from now on, he must call him Master, as he would be teaching him martial arts that utilize the heart of the sun. He explained that the technique he would teach him was the strongest one in the heavenly demon sect, known as the life and death strike. Yun was surprised at the mention of this technique, recalling that it was the demonic technique created by the first leader of the heavenly demon sect. He wondered how this man could possibly know such a powerful martial art. Yun noted that the doctor's appearance in no way suggested someone who could possess knowledge of such a fearsome technique. The doctor noticed Yun's mocking gaze and said firmly that he fully understood what was going through his mind, sarcastically asking if Yun thought he was unworthy of possessing the strongest technique. The doctor explained to Yun that in the lineage of life and death, there were masters and disciples, and that his duty was to find disciples and train them. He added that he became a doctor in order to keep the disciples alive during the harsh training. Yun felt uneasy about how brutal the training might be, and asked how many people had managed to master the life and death strike. The doctor answered clearly that currently, no one had. He explained that the reason everyone had failed to master the technique was due to their bodies being unable to withstand its power, and that the only person who had ever successfully used it was the sect's founder, who possessed the divine sun and moon core. The doctor reassured Yun, telling him that he possessed the heart of the sun, which was still developing, and that once he reached adulthood, his body would also be able to withstand the effects of the dead chaos pill technique. Upon hearing this, Yun felt excited and determined, deciding that after surviving death, he would not waste the chance to learn this legendary art. He would master it and use it alongside the great avatar dance to defeat the traitors. The doctor explained that the real issue was that Yun was the fourth young master, meaning he had 3 older brothers who were sending assassins to try and eliminate him. Suddenly, the doctor signaled Yun to be quiet as they heard the sound of a door opening. A man walked in and introduced himself as Ji Chunwoo, the first young master of the Sun Palace, saying that he had come to see his younger brother after hearing that he had awakened. The doctor expressed annoyance at the sudden visit of the first young master and that he hadn't been informed in advance. Chunwoo replied that he came quickly to see who had caused all the commotion in the palace. Chunwoo approached Yun with a fake smile and coldly asked why he was looking at him like a stranger, claiming that he was his brother Chunwoo. But Yun clearly realized that Chunwoo's smile was not genuine. Yun thought to himself with irritation that this person was truly annoying and didn't feel like an elder brother at all. He calmly replied that he didn't know him. Chunwoo turned to the doctor mockingly and said that his brother must have lost his memory, or else how could he not recognize his older brother? The doctor replied sternly that, as far as he knew, this was the first time the two had met face to face. Chunwoo laughed wickedly and said he must have made a mistake, describing Yun as a mere insect not even worth noticing, less valuable than a bird flying in the sky. Yun smirked inwardly and thought he couldn't believe this young man was trying to provoke him with vulgar words, when in truth he himself had been renowned for his eloquence in his previous life. Yun calmly and clearly replied that the one deserving of the title insect was Chunwoo, not him. Chunwoo was startled and angered by this provocative reply, and Yun sarcastically added that he wondered whether someone with a memory as weak as a bug truly deserved to be the first young master of the Sun Palace. Chunwoo became extremely enraged by Yun's response, and his face darkened with fury. The doctor watched the situation unfold, smirking silently with sarcasm. Chunwoo stepped closer to Yun and violently grabbed his shoulder, saying that being born of a lowly mother and being a nameless child justified his memory issues. His tone turned increasingly threatening as he growled at Yun with clear anger. "You cursed little brother." Despite Chunwoo's threats, Yun remained calm and confident, and said quietly and firmly, "Hua Yun." He then continued, speaking with clarity and strength, declaring that his name was Hua Yun. The doctor's face showed clear signs of shock upon hearing Yun's true name, and he was deeply stunned by its impact. As for the first young master, he too was struck with shock and tension the moment he heard that name. Quickly, the first young master recalled the legend of the great general of the northern heavens associated with that name, and his expression revealed total disbelief. Then he began to laugh mockingly, questioning how the name of the great general of the northern heavens could belong to a boy born of a lowly woman like Yun. Yun replied with complete calm that he did not have a lowly mother as his brother claimed, but he did have an older brother with a filthy mouth. The first young master was enraged by Yun's response and began to reach for his weapon in fury, vowing to deal with Yun. But before anything could happen, the doctor grabbed the first young master's shoulder firmly to stop him from doing anything reckless, pointing out that the fourth young master was still a patient. The first young master glared at the doctor and threatened that Yun would remain a patient for a long time, telling the doctor to prepare plenty of medicine and warning him not to interfere again. Yun then smiled and added a veiled threat, saying perhaps Chunwoo himself might become the one needing medicine if he kept talking. He smiled calmly and sarcastically, then said kindly to the doctor that he really should prepare plenty of medicine, wondering silently just how far the doctor was willing to intervene. The first young master was burning with rage at Yun's sarcastic provocation, but the doctor tightened his grip on his shoulder to signal him to back off. After a few moments, the first young master announced that he would leave this time only because the doctor had intervened. But he suddenly stopped, his eyes filled with murderous intent, and looked at Yun, warning him to watch his words carefully, because next time he might not live to regret what he says. Then he turned around with a mocking smile, telling Yun that he'd see him next time, if he was still alive. After he left, the doctor wondered worriedly whether the first young master had used a hidden weapon against Yun. In fact, the first young master had indeed used a sinister technique that caused serious internal damage over time, leading to the tearing of muscles, internal organs, and blood vessels. But fortunately for Yun, thanks to the heart of the sun within his body, he was able to erase the effects of the hidden weapon easily without suffering real harm. The doctor sighed afterward, saying it was truly annoying that the grandson of the Lord of the Black Darkness was so narrow-minded, wondering if the Lord of the Black Darkness himself was the same. Yun replied with a gentle smile that things turned out well thanks to his good teacher, kindly and jokingly referring to the doctor, who then asked whether Yun had provoked this conflict, clearly confident he could step in if needed. Yun, however, pretended to feel dizzy, saying he was still sick and feeling a bit lightheaded. Then the doctor asked Yun whether the name he had used, Hua Yun, was truly given to him by his mother. Yun smiled shyly and decided it was best to let the doctor believe whatever he wanted. The doctor sighed deeply and told Yun it would be best to let everyone believe he had lost his memory, especially since the first young master had already begun to assume that too. Yun agreed to that quickly. The doctor left, joking that Yun was truly skilled at comebacks, and Yun then sat with complete confidence, his eyes full of deep determination for what lay ahead. 5 days had passed since Yun became the doctor's disciple. Yun remembered clearly his master's words, that if the life and death strike technique were mastered alongside the divine sun and moon core, it would allow him to harness the solar power embedded in the beating heart of the sun within him. Yun was confident in his ability to perform the great avatar dance as long as he could execute the life and death technique. Yun began his training and performed the avatar dance with synchronized and precise movements, with solar energy flowing around him as he moved. Yun felt, as he always did, that the dance never failed him and gave him a profound sense of strength and confidence. While performing, Yun heard a familiar whistle, which made his heart flutter with nostalgia. He instantly recognized it as the whistle of his old master, Yun, who had always accompanied him with his whistling during training sessions. To Yun, this dance had always been tied to his master's whistle, which had given him drive and strength throughout his life. The power of the heart of the sun clearly flowed through his movements, and it felt like his heart was pulsing with immense energy. Though he was still unable to fully use advanced martial arts, he was able to integrate solar energy into each of his movements. The solar energy began to ignite and surround him, bringing him a joy and strength he hadn't felt in a long time. Amid the fiery energy surrounding him, Yun leapt into the air with growing passion and strength. He then landed forcefully and dramatically on the ground, sending out a powerful wave of solar energy. Yun stood still after finishing his moves, realizing that he had finally managed to grasp at least a small part of the secrets behind the martial arts fused with the great avatar dance. He declared inwardly that he was now at the beginning of a path toward either revenge or freedom, and that the first step was to find the essence of martial arts. While Yun was quietly reflecting, he was surprised by someone's voice complimenting the dance, saying it was magnificent and moving. Yun replied humbly and calmly that it was just a simple dance. Yun turned to face the person who had spoken, who then quietly said that if Yun claimed so, he had no choice but to believe him. The man then asked if Dr. Jiang Myong was inside. Yun replied that he had stepped out for a short while and wondered if it was Jiang Myong who had told him Yun was here. The man answered with a slight smile that Yun's movements were impressive, but noted they lacked a fundamental technique to guide them. Yun paid close attention to the man's words and wondered if this person had noticed that the avatar dance was more than mere movements. He realized that this person had to be an expert of an extremely high level. When the man asked Yun if he remembered him, Yun honestly replied that he did not. The man introduced himself as Ilseon Cheon, the lawmaster of the Divine Sun Palace and the Northern Martial Sect. Yun was surprised by this figure and simply replied that his name was Hua Yun. Ilseon Cheon looked slightly surprised upon hearing the name, and commented that it was a very good name, one fit for a god of war, and asked if Sua had chosen it for him. Internally, Yun cautiously wondered whether Ilseon Cheon could be considered an ally, and nervously asked about his reaction to the name. At that moment, Ilseon Cheon smiled and told Yun that he would not use internal energy. He would fight using only his right hand. Yun quietly wondered to himself why Ilseon Cheon had requested to face him, especially since he had considered what Yun did to be just a simple dance, and not a combat technique. Ilseon Cheon responded seriously that any movement, whether a dance or martial art, could become a powerful weapon if the intent behind it was harm. He added that he would grant Yun a Hajang Myong A, because starting tonight, he would need to survive. Yun was surprised and confused, questioning what exactly Ilseon Cheon meant by tonight specifically. Suddenly, Ilseon Cheon rushed toward Yun at high speed, attacking decisively. Yun successfully dodged the surprise attack with remarkable skill and agility. Shock appeared clearly on Ilseon Cheon's face due to Yun's quick reaction. He remained stunned as he realized the unexpected speed and strength of Yun. Ilseon Cheon launched a powerful strike using a signature martial technique, but Yun managed to block it. Yun even counterattacked with a swift move of his own, which greatly surprised Ilseoncheon. He recognized Yun's technique as the falling wing of the azure forest bird, a renowned spear style, and stopped in his tracks, staring in astonishment at Yun's powerful and unexpected strike. Yun executed his move with decisive precision and success, forcing Ilseoncheon to leap back immediately to avoid its powerful impact. Ilseoncheon admitted to himself that, although he had intended not to use internal energy, he had been forced to, and had completely lost the first round. Ilseoncheon wondered in amazement whether Yun was truly the fourth young master. Yun humbly replied that he had only mastered a single technique well. Yun was once again surprised as Ilseoncheon dashed toward him at high speed to attack again. He noted mentally that Ilseoncheon's movements resembled swordsmanship, and wondered whether he was originally a swordsman. Ilseoncheon continued his rapid and successive attacks, trying to pressure and confuse Yun. Yun realized internally that this fight was what Ilseoncheon had meant by a shield, a safe opportunity to develop his skills against a true master. Yun then decided to focus his strength and release the power of the Heart of the Sun from within him to face his opponent more effectively. Yun unleashed a series of attacks infused with solar energy, forcing Ilseoncheon to retreat quickly. Despite that, Ilseoncheon considered in his mind that Yun's attempt to leap into the center of the duel was a weak and immature tactic. Yun seized the moment and launched a swift and powerful counterattack toward his opponent's center. Yun sensed Ilseoncheon's superiority and realized that despite his high status as a martial master, he was still not at the required level. Yun launched another strong and swift attack, harnessing his solar energy, which surprised Ilseoncheon and forced him to defend with difficulty. Yun followed with another fierce strike toward Ilseoncheon, pushing him back even more and with great difficulty. Ilseoncheon dropped to one knee in front of Yun, gasping from exhaustion and stunned by the young man's power. As he rose, Ilseoncheon wondered whether Yun's incredible strength came from natural talent or something else entirely. Ilseoncheon commented with sarcastic admiration that what Yun had just done was truly impressive, and jokingly asked if this really was just a dance, as Yun claimed. Yun smiled simply, and replied that it was indeed just a dance. Ilseoncheon smiled and told Yun that he had intended to grant him a shield, but he hadn't expected Yun to already wield such a sharp weapon. Yun humbly replied that if Ilseoncheon had used his full energy in both hands, he would have already been reduced to a pool of blood. Ilseoncheon affirmed that developing internal energy was easy over time, but what was truly difficult was gaining real human strength, and he praised Yun for already having a solid physical foundation. Yun thought to himself that time would be the real issue, then asked Ilseoncheon where he had learned that dance. At that moment, Dr. Jiang Mayong appeared and told Ilseoncheon that Yun had lost his memory, which surprised Ilseoncheon, who asked how he could have lost his memory and still remember the dance. Dr. Jiang Mayong explained that some things occasionally came back to Yun, while Yun felt relieved by his master's timely arrival. Ilseoncheon expressed annoyance at Dr. Jiang Mayong's interruption, prompting the doctor to question why Ilseoncheon had shown up at the palace so suddenly. Ilseoncheon replied that he had come to deliver orders from the palace master. He pulled out an official letter and explained that he bore instructions from the palace master, despite the trouble caused by the Black Cloud Assembly. Yun wondered to himself whether they had to follow these orders that felt heavy to both him and Dr. Jiang Mayong. Ilseoncheon then seriously announced that the order was for Yun, the fourth young master, to kneel, and Yun immediately complied. Yun smirked inwardly, saying he had never knelt even before the emperor, but now he had to kneel as the fourth young master of the Sun Palace. Yun knelt quietly and submissively, knowing he had to follow orders even if he didn't like them. Ilseoncheon then clearly declared the palace master's order. Since the health of the nameless fourth young master had improved, he was to return to the Seven Knights Pavilion to prepare for the ceremony in which he would receive his official name. Yun remained silent for a moment, prompting Ilseoncheon to ask why he hadn't replied. Yun then answered that he understood the order. Yun realized the meaning behind the term nameless. It meant that officially he had no name, and perhaps that explained their surprise when they heard the name he gave. Even so, Yun resolved inwardly that he would never retreat. He would always remain Hua Yun. Dr. Jiang Mayong mocked Ilseoncheon, questioning why he conducted a meaningless test on someone with no memory. Ilseoncheon replied that it was simply his usual method. Yun asked himself sarcastically what else he was supposed to do. Was he expected to perform rituals just because he belonged to the demon sect? Ilseoncheon turned to Yun and advised him to remember the phrase, "Everything is according to the law of the sun," as the official response when receiving orders from the palace master. Yun suddenly remembered that the assassins who had tried to kill him had used the same phrase, and he wondered if it was possible the palace master had sent them. Yun then solemnly repeated the phrase, "Everything is according to the law of the sun," complying with the command. After that, Il-Seoncheon handed Yun an official letter, which made Yun look at him with confusion. Il-Seoncheon approached and calmly explained that, regardless of whether Yun remembered his past or not, his life as the fourth young master would not change. Il-Seoncheon smiled and told Yun that if he possessed strength, his life would change completely, and asked him if he had any doubts about that. Yun responded by asking what, exactly, he should be doubting. Il-Seoncheon answered that he should doubt everything, because he was the son of Sua and the palace master. Il-Seoncheon stopped himself and apologized to Yun, saying he couldn't tell him any more for now. He then bid farewell to Yun, telling him they would meet again later. As Il-Seoncheon was leaving, Dr. Jang Mayong suddenly stopped him and spoke to him quietly in a low voice. Yun watched the scene from a distance, thinking that in his current body, he couldn't even eavesdrop on their conversation properly. Yun realized there was some secret surrounding the circumstances of his birth that he still didn't know. He stood at the location the palace master had ordered him to return to, gazing out at the vast horizon before him. He was surprised when he arrived at the Seven Knights Pavilion to find it completely ruined. Yun paused, confused and wondering what was really going on. He heard a voice from inside asking why he was just standing there and not coming in. When he entered, he found someone sitting with an arrogant smile, introducing himself as Ji Chunhyuk. Chunhyuk pointed out that the doctor told him Yun had lost his memory, and Yun sarcastically replied that he seemed very well informed. Chunhyuk mocked Yun's words and said he had come to deliver a message. Then, with incredible speed, Chunhyuk leapt forward, declaring his intent to kill Yun, claiming death at his hands was better than living like an insect. Yun then realized this was his second brother, the one his master had once described as the son of a viper, and completely insane. Yun quickly decided that his only option now was to fight to survive. Chunhyuk grinned madly and mockingly asked if Yun really wanted to try fighting him. Suddenly Yun told him to stop talking so much and just attack already. Chunhyuk drew his sword and moved toward Yun, mocking that it was their first time meeting as brothers. He continued threatening, saying that the struggle before death is usually ugly. Yun coldly replied that fighting sounded better than the empty talk Chunhyuk was so used to. Yun assumed a combat stance, ready for the confrontation, deciding that beating sense into his insane brother was the best treatment. Chunhyuk launched into a violent attack, screaming angrily and calling Yun a fool. During the fight, Chunhyuk continued his assault, mockingly asking if Yun would just keep dodging forever. Yun felt the strength of Chunhyuk's attack and realized it wasn't just a normal blade, it was infused with internal energy, which made Yun acknowledge his opponent's power. As the fight went on, Yun wondered whether he should use the heavenly solar path technique. Chunhyuk admitted during the battle that Yun was more agile than he had heard. He tried to provoke Yun by saying that if this was the extent of his combat skills, he should be ashamed of himself. Yun replied with a sarcastic smile that it was unfortunate all his provocations hit their mark, while Chunhyuk failed to land a single real insult. Chunhyuk was surprised by Yun's cold response and admitted that his verbal skills were impressive. Yun sarcastically replied that his skill in speech was better than Chunhyuk's swordsmanship. They paused briefly and Chunhyuk asked if Yun had given up on his life. Yun confidently responded that he wouldn't spare him just because they shared blood. Chunhyuk gave a dark smile and declared he'd overlook that weak provocation. Just this once. Yun wondered to himself whether blood ties were a weakness he could exploit in his brother. Chunhyuk stood firmly and, with a wicked grin, announced that he would now enter the fight seriously. Then he launched into a violent attack on Yun, declaring that while they may share the same father, they were completely different. Chunhyuk's fierce strike nearly hit Yun, who looked tense from the danger of the assault. Yun noticed Chunhyuk's angry expression and realized how much he resembled the Lord of the Sun Palace. But he also saw the internal conflict in Chunhyuk's expression during the attack, as if he were trying to deny something. Yun smirked mischievously and directly asked if he hated the Lord of the Sun Palace. Chunhyuk was visibly irritated and asked Yun if his hatred for the palace master stemmed from his mother. In a violent fit of rage, Chunhyuk launched a decisive sword strike at Yun, intending to end his life. But Yun barely managed to dodge the dangerous blow at the last second. Yun noticed that the tip of Chunhyuk's sword trembled slightly during the attack, confirming that his provocation had worked. He wondered internally if his taunting had actually had an effect on his brother. Chunhyuk mocked Yun, asking if he wanted to stay alive so badly that he was willing to roll on the ground like that. Yun replied with sharp sarcasm, saying rolling on the ground was far better than hearing Chunhyuk constantly whining about his mother. Chunhyuk glared at Yun and angrily asked what he even knew about the situation. Yun began gathering his internal energy and confidently stated that among the palace master's wives, there was only one he had truly loved. Yun continued boldly, asking if that one wife was Chunhyuk's mother. Chunhyuk, seething with rage, clarified that the palace master's 3 wives, including his mother, were all political marriages, nothing more. He went on to explain that Yun's mother, Bansua, was the only one who truly captured the palace master's love, and that Yun was the miracle child who was offered as a sacrifice but miraculously survived. Yun was shocked by this strange information and wondered internally what Chunhyuk really meant by it. Yun smiled calmly and mockingly asked his brother if jealousy was the real reason behind his hatred for the palace master. Chunhyuk stood up, furious, and told Yun that he was completely wrong, adding that if Yun died, the palace master would suffer deeply. He added with even greater anger that the palace master would be in pain because his beloved son had died. Yun felt extremely confused because Chunhyuk's words contradicted everything he believed about the palace master. He began to reconsider the palace master's decisions, especially his choice to offer Yun as a sacrifice, which made him doubt Chunhyuk's claims about the palace master's love for him and his mother. Yun clearly remembered that the palace master had personally chosen him as the sacrifice, confirming for him that he was never loved. He wondered what the palace master's real motives were for sending him to the Seven Knights Pavilion, a move that led to this difficult situation. Yun smirked and told Chunhyuk that he was clearly just a cunning man, deciding that for now, surviving was his top priority. Chunhyuk responded with angry sarcasm, thanking Yun for insulting the palace master, and asked if killing another son would really cause any problems. Chunhyuk grinned viciously and said that the first rule in the Sun Palace stated that anyone without a name was not considered a person. He continued laughing, pointing his sword at Yun, and saying that since Yun had no name, no one would care if he died. Yun froze in place for a moment, realizing that the situation had just become far more dangerous for him. The fierce battle between Yun and Chunhyuk continued, with powerful and rapid exchanges of attacks. Chunhyuk shouted in rage at Yun, declaring that he would kill him now as he delivered a decisive strike. Yun realized that his provocation had indeed worked and began preparing for Chunhyuk's reckless reaction. While watching Chunhyuk prepare to attack, Yun noticed the tip of his sword trembling visibly. He also noticed that Chunhyuk's left shoulder was raised unnaturally high. Yun anticipated that his opponent would fall to the right due to his unbalanced stance. Yun gathered energy around him, recalling a famous saying, "If you're standing at the edge of a 100-foot pole, take a step forward." He then stepped forward at incredible speed, applying the old saying literally. As Yun moved, he felt as if the world had opened before him, and a new path had appeared. In that critical moment, Yun realized that the step he took toward death had actually opened a new world for him. Chunhyuk was momentarily stunned as he saw Yun rushing toward him at astonishing speed. Yun launched a powerful blazing strike directly at Chunhyuk, infused with the rotating energy of the Heart of the Sun. This blazing attack was the first incarnated flame fist Yun had unleashed, and it struck with overwhelming force. Chunhyuk took the hit with great impact, clearly retreating in pain. Yun rushed toward him again with tremendous speed, aiming for a finishing blow. He used the Slayer Sword of the Four Kings technique, striking down at Chunhyuk from above. Chunhyuk was shocked by the power of the strike and struggled greatly to block it. He retaliated again with ferocity, attempting to counter Yun's surprise assault. Yun gathered a massive amount of energy in his fists, preparing to face Chunhyuk more seriously. He focused his energy intensely into his fists, preparing to deliver another devastating strike. Yun launched his powerful attack with crushing force, causing a huge explosion at the battlefield. The strike unleashed a massive wave of dust and smoke that engulfed the entire area. Amid the thick dust, an old man appeared, walking toward the battlefield. It turned out to be a powerful and imposing elder, with Ilseon Cheon appearing behind him, visibly injured from the fight. On the other side, Yun remained in place, alert and ready, observing the situation calmly. Chunhyuk tried to charge again, but the elder firmly stopped him, saying that the life of the second young master did not belong to him alone. The elder firmly stated that the heir of the Black Cloud Assembly could not be defeated so easily, which deeply surprised Yun. He then declared with authority that he would take over the matter himself and bear responsibility for everything that happened today. Yun realized internally that the elder's power far surpassed that of an ordinary expert. He was facing a peak-level master. Feeling concerned about his current strength, Yun understood he couldn't face this opponent head-on, and decided that his next strategy would be to wait for any possible chance to make the elder lower his guard. The elder continued his fierce assault, charging toward Yun, and loudly declaring that he wouldn't allow him to escape. Yun smiled calmly and sarcastically asked if the elder really wanted to get involved in a childish fight, as if he were just a scared boy. At that moment, the elder became more violent due to Yun's unexpected words and moved quickly toward him, insisting that the strike Chun-hyuk almost received was strong enough to nearly shatter his skull. The elder resumed his attacks with increasing strength and visible anger. The force of his energy grew more intense as he advanced toward Yun in a fearsome manner. But Yun dodged the attack with agility and grace, smiling slyly as he did, because his real target from the beginning was not the elder, but someone else, Chun-hyuk. In a sudden ambush, Yun appeared in front of Chun-hyuk and delivered a brutal strike, announcing that he was his true target. The elder turned around, shocked, shouting in disbelief at what he saw. Yun grabbed Chun-hyuk tightly, warning the elder in a clear voice to stop immediately. He then snapped Chun-hyuk's finger, threatening the elder by telling him he'd soon realize how important this boy was to him. The elder's expression turned to intense rage, and he asked if Yun thought he would survive after this stunt. Yun ignored the threat and calmly continued breaking Chun-hyuk's fingers, stating that there were still 8 more joints left untouched. The elder's anger exploded at this blackmail, calling Yun a stubborn brat and demanding to know what he wanted. Yun coldly told him that he would ask the questions and the elder would simply answer. He then clearly threatened that if the elder didn't want to see more of the boy's bones breaking, he'd better remember that. The elder offered Yun a deal, release Chun-hyuk, and in return, he would spare Yun's life for today. Yun mocked the offer, saying he wasn't foolish enough to believe the elder would let him live after freeing Chun-hyuk. The elder insisted that even if he disappeared now, he couldn't trust Yun not to kill Chun-hyuk afterward. Yun explained to the elder that this confrontation would end with both of them dying, and told him to consider that carefully. Yun spoke coldly, accusing Chun-hyuk of becoming worse than a worm after previously advising him not to live so pathetically. Yun smiled and leaned close to Chun-hyuk's ear, whispering that he would let him live anyway. But then Yun suddenly stabbed Chun-hyuk, explaining coldly that it would hurt a little and suggesting he ask Elder Yang for help. The elder was overwhelmed with fury and began trembling as he heard Yun's ruthless provocation. Yun appeared completely confident and sarcastically asked the elder if he was still unsure of what to do, suggesting he destroy his own dantian. Yun then made a clear offer. The elder could take Chun-hyuk alive if he destroyed his own internal energy core. He added with a mocking smile that this way, the elder could save his own life and take the second young master with him, even if it cost him half his life. Yun tightened his grip on Chun-hyuk and told the elder that the choice was now his martial arts, or the life of the second young master. The elder stood frozen, trembling intensely, unable to come up with a suitable response to Yun's harsh offer. Chun-hyuk felt shocked and confused by the elder's hesitation, as he appeared unable to make a decision. Yun, with a faint smile, noticed that he had created a deep rift between the elder and Chun-hyuk, and considered it an additional win. He decided internally that his most important goal now was survival, and he warned the elder that sunrise was near. Yun turned toward Elder Yang and called out to get his attention. Elder Yang responded quickly and fiercely, preparing a new attack filled with black energy and rage, shouting loudly at Yun. At that moment, a sudden violent surge of red energy cut off Elder Yang's path. This energy caused a massive explosion, forcing everyone to retreat and stop immediately. From the darkness emerged a majestic figure wielding a flaming sword of red energy. It was Ilseon himself. Ilseon spoke calmly and firmly to Elder Yang, addressing him by name and title. Yang Mongsan, 5th Elder. Ilseon declared that Yang Mongsan, a member of the Black Cloud Assembly, was forbidden from entering the main palace at night without prior permission. Elder Yang burst out in anger, asking if that was really the issue right now, especially considering the state the 4th young master was in. Ilseon calmly replied that what had happened was merely a childish quarrel and told Elder Yang to remain calm, addressing Chun-hyuk by his formal name. Ilseon explained to Chun-hyuk that he would overlook what happened today, as long as he also acknowledged it. Chun-hyuk reluctantly agreed and said he accepted what had occurred. Ilseon then turned to Yun and reminded him that the strong can take everything from the weak, and that this was their sect's ancient law: respect belongs to strength. Chun-hyuk, furious, shouted in protest at Ilseon's words, calling them nonsense. He angrily asked how someone without a name like Yun could be acknowledged under the law of respect for strength. Ilseon cut him off sternly, affirming that the 4th young master already had a name and that the ceremony to officially grant it would be held tomorrow. He added, addressing Chun-hyuk directly, that he must now acknowledge his defeat. Then he asked Yun, under the law of respect for strength, what he wished to take from Chun-hyuk. Yun responded by asking if his opponent's life was an available option. Elder Yang roared with anger at the harsh suggestion, calling Yun a bastard. Il Seonchon stopped him with a sharp flick of his sword, without even looking at him, which made him fall back immediately. Il Seonchon then confirmed sternly to Yun that Chunhyuk's life was indeed a valid option. Elder Yang spoke again, asking Il Seonchon if he truly believed these events would be forgotten so easily. Il Seonchon replied coldly, asking what importance forgetting had in the first place, asserting that his role was to enforce the law in the name of the palace master, not to entertain idle chatter. Chunhyuk collapsed to the ground, trembling in fear and shock after hearing what had happened, along with the intense pain from his broken fingers. Yun stepped toward him and asked with a calm, mocking smile if he still wanted to live like a worm. Chunhyuk screamed from the humiliation and said in despair that if Yun was going to play with him like this, he might as well kill him now. Yun looked at Chunhyuk coldly and thought to himself that perhaps it would be better to kill him to avoid future trouble. But Yun suddenly stopped when he saw Elder Yang trying to console Chunhyuk and realized there was a powerful faction behind him, making him quietly reconsider his decision. Yun realized inwardly that the outcome of what happened had already been decided in advance, and that the decision would always belong to the strongest presence in the room. He also became certain that Il Seoncheon had come from the beginning to act as a mediator in this confrontation. With a calm smile, Yun decided that he had no option now but to end things peacefully. Shock and confusion appeared on the faces of Elder Yang and Chunhyuk after Yun's unexpected move. In a sudden burst, Yun broke one more of Chunhyuk's fingers in a swift strike, making him scream in pain. He then threw Chunhyuk to the ground and calmly declared to everyone that the matter was now resolved as a draw. Il Seonchon calmly agreed with the decision, saying it was fair. He raised his hand firmly to officially announce the end of the confrontation. He then strictly ordered Elder Yang to return immediately to the Black Cloud Assembly. Il Seonchon stated that the crime of unauthorized entry into the main palace at night would be dealt with later. He also added that regarding the battle between 4th Young Master Hua Yun and 2nd Young Master Chunhyuk, there would be no punishment in accordance with the loser Chunhyuk's wishes. Chunhyuk approached Elder Yang, sneering at Yun and saying he should repeat what he said about his mother during the official naming ceremony tomorrow. Il Seonchon remained calm and clearly stated that his standards would not change. He then ordered Elder Yang to leave immediately, affirming that he would remember his words well. Il Seonchon then turned to Yun and congratulated him on his victory, and Yun thanked him in return. Before leaving, Il Seonchon advised Yun to survive the next day as well, reminding him of the phrase, "Everything is according to the law of the sun." He then departed swiftly and quietly. Yun remained alone, deeply reflecting on what had been said, telling himself that he was no longer the great general of the northern heavens, Saiyan Hua Yun. He admitted to himself that he was now just the troublesome 4th Young Master of the Sun Palace sect. Yun continued walking away, only hoping he could get some sleep after such a chaotic night. But soon, a group of assassins emerged from the shadows around him. They had been silently observing him. The next morning, 2 individuals from afar wondered if the 4th Young Master had really lived in such a rundown place. The other replied affirmatively, explaining that the Palace Master had personally ordered Yun's return to this miserable location. He continued speaking mockingly, saying that despite these terrible circumstances, once Yun received his official name, he would no longer have to endure such treatment. One of them laughed, saying that the money spent on Yun would come from their own pockets, and admitted there was no way around it. They continued talking, noting that this was inevitable because of the will of that old man. They suddenly stopped when they saw a body lying on the ground and realized that assassins had infiltrated the area. They then noticed Yun standing calmly above the corpses, asking in a cold tone if they were the ones who had sent the killers, because criminals always return to the scene of the crime. One of them smirked and denied involvement, saying the culprit definitely wasn't the 2nd or 4th Young Master. The man with long hair smiled kindly and introduced himself to Yun as Ji Chunhan, the 3rd Young Master. Yun wondered inwardly, puzzled and amazed, who was this person claiming to be his brother? The next day, while they were on the road toward the Twin Extremes Fortress, one of the escorts explained that they would take this route until they reached their destination. He added, trying to comfort Yun, that during the naming ceremony, he only needed to say yes, and everything would be over quickly, advising him not to be too nervous. Chunhan explained that once Yun received his name, he would receive financial support from the Sun Palace, which he could use to repair the 7 Knights Pavilion and obtain clothes and weapons. Yun sighed, a bit annoyed, commenting that his ceremonial robe was slightly oversized, and complained about how much everyone talked along the way. Then Ji Chunhan recalled something and said with a smile that he'd heard Elder Yang of the Black Cloud Assembly and the 2nd Young Master were in very bad condition. Yun replied simply that he had just heard about it. Ji Chunhan showed mild surprise at Yun's response. He then smiled gently, but added with a cryptic tone that Yun knew very well what he meant. Yun noticed that his third brother was beginning to reveal his true intentions. Ji Chunhan leaned toward Yun with a sly smile and said he'd heard who had put them in such bad condition. A terrifying tiger-like aura appeared behind him as he continued calmly and mockingly that the fourth young master was the reason. Yun wondered to himself why things had to be this complicated with his third brother, especially since the first and second had been very clear in their intentions. Still, he replied to Ji Chunhan that he was indeed the one responsible for what happened to them. Yun admitted to himself that his first and second brothers had clearly tried to kill him, but he still didn't understand his third brother's intentions. After a short pause, Yun calmly asked Ji Chunhan for something in return for the answer he'd just given him. Ji Chunhan clearly stated that he would offer something in exchange for what Yun had shared, suggesting help with repairing the Seven Knights Pavilion. Yun rejected that offer outright, and instead asked Ji Chunhan to tell him a story. Ji Chunhan asked in surprise what kind of story he wanted to hear. Yun simply replied, "Everything." Chunhan commented that this seemed a little unbalanced. Yun thought quietly for a moment and wondered if he should change his approach. He then surprised Ji Chunhan by bowing formally and humbly asking for his help. Ji Chunhan mocked the sudden shift in Yun's attitude and asked if it was acceptable to change so easily. Yun repeated his request more seriously, saying that he humbly asked for his help. Whether he did so or not was his choice. Ji Chunhan laughed and said he didn't know his brother was this amusing. He added with a smile that he usually charged people for information, but he would answer Yun, since he was his brother. Yun then asked directly what would happen if someone who already had a name went to the naming ceremony. Suddenly, the carriage they were riding in came to a halt in the middle of the road, and voices shouted, "Stop! Stop the carriage!" Ji Chunhan looked outside in concern to see what was happening. The guards around the carriage quickly jumped out into defensive positions, causing noticeable tension. Yun observed the situation and began calmly analyzing it, noting that the guards were spreading in 4 directions systematically. He wondered to himself if they were being protected or surrounded. After a brief moment, Ji Chunhan returned to Yun's earlier question about his true name, and Yun answered clearly and confidently that his name was Hua Yun. Ji Chunhan smiled and said that even in such a situation, Hua Yun was a good and strong name. He then asked if Yun's mother was the one who gave it to him. Yun internally questioned why everyone always mentioned his mother whenever they heard his name, and decided he needed to uncover the reason naturally. Ji Chunhan asked whether anyone else knew Yun already had a name, suggesting that if no one did, then he should just accept a new one today and move on. Yun then vividly remembered the faces of his brothers and the 2 senior masters, and he felt the weight of the situation now resting on his shoulders. Yun recalled the people he had met before, among them Dr. Jiang Mayang and the law master of the palace, and told Ji Chunhan that they knew, feeling frustrated by all these complications. Ji Chunhan also expressed annoyance that such sensitive information had spread and reached people who shouldn't know, like the law master and even the Black Cloud Assembly. He took a deep breath and then seriously explained that the naming ceremony was a ritual reserved only for the direct sons of the Sun Palace Master. The Palace Master himself bestows the names upon his direct descendants, usually at the age of 10, but Yun's case was complicated. Yun reflected inwardly that he hadn't been considered a real person in the palace for 5 years, being the son of an unknown, abandoned woman of the Palace Master. One of Yun's escorts commented that everyone had childhood names even before the naming ceremony, pointing out that Ji Chunhan's childhood name had been Dan Wook Young. Ji Chunhan cut him off sternly, correcting that the issue wasn't the childhood name, it was the fact that he had been granted the right to use the respect for strength law directly from the law master himself. Yun felt that Ji Chunhan had initially hidden what he knew, but now spoke as if he had witnessed everything firsthand, which raised Yun's suspicion that he might also have inside sources within the Black Cloud Assembly. Yun remembered the energy he had felt when shaking Ji Chunhan's hand and the childhood name Dan Wook Young, which deepened his doubts about Ji Chunhan's true identity. Yun became increasingly convinced that Ji Chunhan's identity held a major secret and wondered if someone who gathered such information so easily would really reveal it to him now. Ji Chunhan interrupted Yun's thoughts and told him seriously that the situation was extremely dangerous, especially since the naming ceremony would bring together the highest figures of the Sun Palace, including the 3 great ones. He explained that if Yun rejected the name given to him by the Palace Master during the ceremony, a real catastrophe would occur. Yun wondered internally if they would actually kill him over it, and began to doubt Ji Chunhan's real plan. Ji Chunhan continued, saying he didn't know exactly how the palace master would react, but he was sure the palace master hated having his authority challenged. He added that neither Ji Chunwu's Black Darkness Assembly nor Ji Chunhyuk's Black Cloud Assembly would defend Yun. They'd instead seize the opportunity to kill him. Yun agreed with Ji Chunhan's assessment internally, thinking it all made a lot of sense. But he wondered why Ji Chunhan excluded himself from this dangerous equation, thinking he might be trying to win his trust. Yun smiled calmly and told Ji Chunhan that in that case, he would need the help of a third party to survive. Ji Chunhan confidently smiled and confirmed that a third party already existed and that they represented it. Ji Chunhan explained with a sly smile that they were completely different from groups like the Demon Sect or the Black Cloud Assembly, and then asked Yun directly if he wanted to know their name. He revealed that he belonged to the Dragon Sea Trading Company and offered to intervene to save Yun. He continued, saying they would step in to rescue him, and he would be appropriately punished afterward either way. Ji Chunhan then told Yun that if he wanted to survive, he would have to come under his authority, as his third brother. He added that if they wanted, they could even get close to the central plains filled with beasts. When Yun asked how, Ji Chunhan replied with a confident smile that he would tell him if Yun agreed to join them. Ji Chunhan extended his hand toward Yun, surrounded by an aura resembling a snake and a tiger, and confidently asked if he would accept the offer. Yun remained still, looking at Ji Chunhan without hesitation, surrounded by a mysterious aura of his own. He then surprised Ji Chunhan by calmly thanking him, stating that he had successfully broken through the ultimate Black Knight illusion created by his maternal grandfather, Dan Guillaume Seong. Yun confidently added that the life he had lived was far more horrifying than any illusion he had seen. Ji Chunhan remained silent for a few moments, visibly surprised by Yun's reaction and immense confidence. He then smiled calmly and told Yun that he still had time to think things through and decide. He concluded clearly, telling Yun that the decision he would make would determine whether this place became his execution ground or his salvation. The journey toward the location of the official naming ceremony began as the guards gave the command to move. Inside the Grand Hall, the Lord of the Sun Palace sat in dignity and anticipation, ready to begin the ceremony. The attendees, his followers, chanted official phrases like 1,000 suns and radiance of the moonlit star as an affirmation of the palace's grandeur and prestige. The Master of Ceremonies formally announced that the recipient of the name today would be the fourth young master, who until now had no name, and requested him to enter. Yun stepped toward the majestic building where the ceremony was to take place, marveling at the palace's size and grandeur. The guards immediately stopped Yun's carriage when it arrived at the outer gate of the Grand Palace. Ji Chunhan approached with a smile and asked one of the guards who they were waiting for, especially since the ceremony was about to begin upstairs. Guard Jiang Mayong responded with a sarcastic smile, saying that Ji Chunhan was as clever as always, calling him the third prince. Ji Chunhan asked if they were supposed to ascend from this route. Jiang Mayong angrily clarified that he was referring to his younger brother Huai Yun, not to himself. Yun noticed that Jiang Mayong was irritated by the petty political theatrics involving little brothers, but still agreed to let the third prince's group proceed first. Then Ji Chunhan told Dr. Jiang Mayong clearly that the person undergoing the ceremony should be accompanied by the holder of the previous title, and that he would take that role himself. But Jiang Mayong objected, saying he would carry out the task. Ji Chunhan protested angrily, questioning whether Jiang Mayong wanted them to be humiliated at the summit, and remarked that he usually only appeared at legal assemblies. Ji Chunhan then sarcastically and politely reminded him that they both belonged to the Sun Palace, and noted that Jiang Mayong had previously ignored an invitation from the Huryong Trade Association. Jiang Mayong coldly replied that he hadn't realized they shared such affiliation, and that he wasn't obligated to clean up the mess caused by their factions. At that moment, a loud voice called out from inside the building for guard Jiang Mayong, drawing everyone's attention. Yun felt curious about this openly hostile relationship between the two sides, but decided to focus on the ceremony for now. Jiang Mayong stepped forward and declared that they would go up first, informing the third prince with full confidence. Ji Chunhan looked slightly tense when he heard Yun's decision. Before leaving, Ji Chunhan advised Yun to remember his words carefully and to rely only on him. Yun thanked him in return. Guard Jiang Mayong helped Yun into his ceremonial robes, commenting that clothes make the man. Yun warmly thanked him. Jiang Mayong then explained the reason for his presence and told him that the Northern Lord had arrived that morning. He confirmed that the second prince had been completely defeated and that Elder Yang had witnessed it himself. Jiang Mayong expressed great astonishment that the fourth prince, who had never trained in martial arts, had achieved such a victory. Yun humbly replied that perhaps it was thanks to his exceptional teacher. Jiang Myung told him to save the flattery for another time, like when he actually needed to flatter someone. Jiang Myung wondered to himself whether the fourth Prince Yun had secretly mastered martial arts, but dismissed the thought since he had previously been so weak. He then speculated that the power of the core of the sun might be part of the eternal sovereignty's legacy. Yun confirmed that he was now using the core of the sun without relying on the trinity of life and death technique. Jiang Myung praised that and assured him that once he mastered that technique, he would become truly invincible. Jiang Myung then warned him of the danger of today's ceremony, especially with the presence of the second prince and the Silent Cloud sect, who bore a grudge against him. He expected intervention from the second prince's maternal grandfather, sect leader Jiang Sun. Yun asked about the first prince's faction, and Jiang Myung replied that they might act recklessly, but were unlikely to cause trouble without a clear reason. Yun understood the situation, and Jiang Myung reminded him to remember his advice carefully. Finally, Jiang Myung warned him clearly that the people who seem safest today are the last ones Yun should trust. Yun replied that he had already felt the same way. Jiang Myung continued his advice to Yun, warning him especially about the eyes and tongue of the third prince, describing him as a snake with a silver tongue and venomous gaze. Yun thanked him for the warning. Jiang Myung then emphasized that the only person who truly mattered was the palace master, who had spoken to Yun before, but could not be fully trusted, like a mirage. Yun replied that he completely understood what his mentor Jiang Myung meant. After that, Jiang Myung clearly stated that today's life-or-death battle would depend entirely on the palace master, so Yun must leave a strong impression on him. When Yun reached the top, Ji Chunhan noticed him speaking with Jiang Myung and felt curious about what they had discussed. Ji Chunhan gestured to Yun to enter, and the two passed through the massive palace gates. As they entered the hall, everyone called out formal greetings, chanting, "One sun from the sky, radiance of the moonlit night." It was officially announced that today's recipient of a name was the fourth prince, Mo Myung, and he was asked to step forward. Yun looked toward the high-ranking figures present, reflecting inwardly that Jiang Myung had likely met with the Northern Lord earlier that morning and arranged a means of escape for him. Yun also realized that the reason the third prince had been pushed aside today was by drowning him in a political power struggle. Then, in unison, everyone declared that everything would be decided according to the law of the sun. Yun stood directly before the palace master, who sat majestically waiting. The palace master, Ji Gongsun, sat with immense confidence and dignity, surrounded by an aura of power. Yun clearly saw that the palace master held the final key, and he admired the sheer military dominance that radiated from him, far beyond his current position. The palace master then announced that from this moment on, the name of the fourth prince would be Ji Chun Myol, which means he who destroys the heavens. Upon hearing that, all attendees bowed and once again chanted slogans of loyalty and reverence. The palace master noticed Yun's expression of dissatisfaction and sharply asked if he had any objections to the name. Yun answered clearly and firmly, yes, shocking everyone, who then asked if he preferred a different name. Yun declared that he already had a name of his own, Hua Yun. A wave of tension and stunned silence swept through the senior attendees after hearing the name Hua Yun. The three elder princes sat frozen in shock and unease at Yun's bold declaration. The palace master raised his hand in a sharp motion, demanding silence and an immediate halt to the ceremony. He stepped toward Yun with clear threat in his eyes. And Yun realized that the one who had tried to kill his son before would not hesitate to do it again. Yun felt inside that what he was doing might be false pride, but he resolved to do everything in the name of the warlord, the great general of the northern heavens. The palace master calmly repeated the name Hua Yun, remembering that he was the son of Sua. At that moment, the leader of the Silent Cloud sect, Jiang Sunho, intervened and declared that he had something to say regarding the fourth prince's name. He explained that the fourth prince possessing the name Hua Yun was not just a childhood name. It was a crime to conceal a true name before the naming ceremony, and he demanded the execution of the fourth prince. The palace master approached Yun and told him that the Silent Cloud sect leader had always hated him and looked down on him from the beginning. Then he directly asked Yun, was he the one who defeated Chun Hyuk? Yun replied confidently, yes. The palace master continued speaking, also noting that Yun had managed to shatter Elder Yang Mongsan's arm. Yun confidently confirmed that this was true. The palace master remarked with interest that such an achievement was worthy of destroying the sun altar. Yun smiled confidently, stating that it had only been possible thanks to the palace master's graciousness. The palace master stepped closer to Yun and firmly told him that he must choose now. He presented two clear options: either become the fourth prince under the name Ji Chun Myol or remain Hua Yun, and walk a path filled with thorns. A powerful red energy began to surge from the palace master as he unleashed his power in a grand, overwhelming display. Yun wondered internally if what he was witnessing was the first step toward transcending humanity, toward sovereignty or demonhood. An extraordinary surge of energy spread through the entire area, shocking everyone present. Deep down, Yun felt he could never live a life where he couldn't express his true self, a life he viewed as nothing but a hollow shell. The palace master sharply noticed the critical stance Yun had taken. Yun then charged forward with full determination to face the palace master head-on, showing no hesitation. Yun said to himself with anger and resolve that while he could retreat or bow, abandoning his identity would render everything meaningless. He shouted with all his strength that he was and would always be Hua Yun. An enormous burst of energy erupted from his body, affirming his true identity once again. Yun's energy spread through the hall with astonishing force, leaving everyone in awe. All those present witnessed this powerful explosion of energy and stared in stunned silence. The confrontation between Yun and the palace master ignited with fierce intensity, and everyone realized it was a critical turning point. The palace master stood silently for a moment, surprised by Yun's strength and determination. Then the palace master smiled calmly and said that if this was Yun's choice, so be it. He officially declared in front of everyone that from now on his name would be Hua Yun. However, he continued, stating that he would temporarily strip Yun of his title as fourth prince. The palace master explained that since Yun had rejected what was granted to him, he must now atone through action. He then called upon sect leader Jiang Sun to step forward. Jiang Sun affirmed his presence before the palace master. The palace master spoke of disturbances that had previously occurred in the coastal lands belonging to the Silent Cloud sect, which had disrupted their alliance with the Heavenly Dragon Coalition. Then, the palace master clearly announced the appointment of Hua Yun as a special commander for an expedition in the Southern Sea region under the Sun Palace's control. He ordered sect leader Jiang Sun to accompany Yun and eliminate the bloody-clad demon who had caused the unrest. The palace master rejected sect leader Jiang Sun's request for Yun's execution and instead declared that he would instruct Dr. Jiang Maiyong to examine his grandson, Ji Chunhyuk. He added that the lands where the bloody-clad demon had appeared historically belonged to the Silent Cloud sect, so he requested that Jiang Sun assist the special expedition commander. Sect leader Jiang Sun smiled quietly and said it would be his honor. Finally, the palace master asked Dr. Jiang Maiyong to step forward before him. The palace master summoned Dr. Jiang Maiyong and clearly ordered him to accompany the special expedition commander. Dr. Jiang Maiyong responded obediently, saying he understood. Yun then wondered to himself about the palace master's earlier words that he needed to see something for himself and questioned internally what that mysterious thing might be. The palace master raised his hand and powerfully declared that everything was carried out according to the law of the sun, affirming his absolute authority and presence. The naming ceremony concluded officially with repeated affirmations from all present, shouting, "By the law of the sun," and "By the law." Later that night, Yun spoke with his master, Dr. Jiang Maiyong, and asked if he had spoken with the palace master beforehand. Jiang Maiyong answered that he had to, so his only disciple wouldn't become a corpse. He then asked Yun why he told the palace master that he needed to see. Yun paused briefly, then told his master that what he meant was learning the trigram of life and death technique, and that this was the perfect chance to train away from the palace walls. Yun then asked who else knew about the trigram of life and death. Jiang Maiyong replied that the ones who knew were Yun and himself, as well as the palace master, the northern martial lord, and perhaps a few who merely suspected it. Yun silently understood without further comment. He then thought to himself that there were two people among those mentioned whom he needed to be especially cautious of, and was sure his master had reasons for not telling him everything. Jiang Maiyong pointed out that it seemed Yun had already packed his bags, based on the nature of his questions, and Yun sarcastically asked if that made him a minimalist, or simply someone with nothing to pack at all. Yun recalled his past life, how he carried everything, armor, spears, swords, and that all the weapons he once used were now stored in the Imperial Museum as war trophies. Jiang Maiyong called Yun disciple, and Yun responded immediately and respectfully. Jiang Maiyong then asked Yun for his thoughts and impression of the palace master he had met earlier. Yun asked what he meant exactly. Jiang Maiyong clarified that he was referring to someone at the Hua Jing level, a peak that all martial artists dreamed of. Yun replied that the palace master was truly remarkable. Jiang Maiyong asked how Yun managed to maintain his composure under the pressure of someone at the Hua Jing level, especially since he hadn't undergone formal martial training. Yun joked that somehow he managed, but inwardly Yun admitted that it was not easy at all. At first, all he could do was endure the pressure, and he thought he might pass out at any moment. Yun then explained that a burning energy surged from the core of the sun within him, preventing him from collapsing under the palace master's aura. When Jiang Myong asked if that energy had fully taken control, Yun confirmed it had been perfect. It was wild and refused to submit. Jiang Myong was very impressed, saying that what happened exceeded his expectations, especially since Yun had not yet mastered the energy of life and chaos that belonged to the trigram of life and death. Jiang Myong then explained that the core of the sun Yun possessed had little historical documentation, but that an ancient predecessor had once held such a core and successfully mastered the trigram. Yun expressed strong interest in learning more about the difficulty of this renowned technique and asked Jiang Myong to explain it more clearly. Jiang Myong calmly stated that the technique was a great secret and represented the pinnacle of martial arts. It was far from a simple combat form. He then said that the greatest challenge in learning the technique lay in a particular concept, the thin line between life and death, which immediately captured Yun's full attention. Jiang Myong opened a box and took out a mysterious item, telling Yun that the trigram of life and death was literally a martial art that placed its practitioner at the very edge of life and death, encompassing the essence of all martial arts. Yun asked in astonishment if he was really supposed to consume that thing. Jiang Myong answered that he expected no less from one of the 5 prodigies. Yun anxiously asked what would happen if he refused to consume it. Jiang Myong replied that, according to historical records, most experts would have it forcibly implanted. But Jiang Myong quickly clarified that this wasn't what Yun might be thinking. It wasn't a physical substance. Rather, it was a secret technique that embedded its principles into the meridians of life and death. Jiang Myong concluded by asking if Yun had ever heard of the concept of universal sin karma. Yun responded with surprise, asking, "You mean like regular sins?" Dr. Jiang Myong continued his explanation to Yun, saying that what lay before him now was called the Chaos Life Pill, which carried all the grudges and sins committed by living beings combined. He explained that consuming this pill would blur the boundaries between life and death entirely, making the response to it purely instinctual. Jiang Myong continued, stressing that in this particular case, Yun must maintain his awareness and practice the supreme technique of the trigram of life and death, which consists of 7 forms. He spoke seriously, warning Yun that most people die from being unable to bear the evil and sin within the pill, and was about to explain something else. Suddenly, Yun placed his hand over his mouth after swallowing the entire pill, shocking Jiang Myong, who questioned why he had done that. Jiang Myong shouted angrily at Yun, saying he was supposed to take the pill gradually, not all at once, and emphasized the danger of what he had just done. He grabbed Yun's face firmly, warning him that he had just swallowed a lethal poison and could lose his mind at any moment. But Yun appeared completely normal, showing no signs of fatigue, which astonished Jiang Myong. He asked nervously if Yun felt any urge to kill or destroy. Yun calmly and confidently replied that he felt no such thing at all. Jiang Myong then asked if he felt anything strange. Yun answered with a gentle smile that he only felt something brief and faint. Jiang Myong was greatly surprised, wondering aloud if this was the true trait of possessing the core of the sun and being the celestial star of the sun and moon. Yun replied calmly that a good result was all that mattered in the end, and asked Jiang Myong if he could sense the energy of chaos life now. Yun felt inside that this was the same power he had faced in his previous life, the greatest obstacle he had encountered, and said it felt as if he had gained a new arm. Jiang Myong, puzzled, wondered if he should even teach Yun the trigram of life and death, given his astonishing natural ability to absorb this energy. Yun simply answered that they wouldn't know, unless they tried. Jiang Myong looked at Yun, wondering if this was how the power of the stars was meant to manifest. Elsewhere in Gangyong Fortress, someone called out to Elder Huan to inform him that His Majesty had requested his presence in court the next day. The messenger said the king wanted to discuss the New Year's sacrificial rituals and asked if they intended to hold a warlord's military festival. But the person admitted he hadn't heard the details clearly. Meanwhile, at the Hangcheon Temple, Elder Hai Cheon Sayang appeared in great shock. He had noticed something unusual in the sky, and began murmuring in disbelief that it was just like the day the great general who swallowed all the world's evil had appeared, Xian Huayun. Elder Hai recalled the day his great master had died, and wondered in fear if the world was still so chaotic that this person had returned again. He then shouted in terror and certainty that the warlord had indeed returned. The next morning, Yun's procession began to move, and he reflected inwardly that even though he had gained the power of chaos life, his current strength was still limited. One of the guards teased him sarcastically, saying they were late this morning specifically because of him. Yun wondered to himself why the lawmaster had joined them in the procession. Il Seonchon spoke to Dr. Jiang Mayong, saying he had come to check on the young master under the palace master's orders, and sarcastically criticized Jiang Mayong for interfering too late in the previous confrontation, commenting that the young master's hand had been in a terrible state. He added mockingly that Yun had almost disabled Elder Yang's martial arts using just his words, which left Dr. Jiang Mayong stunned. He noted that what Yun had actually done was break Elder Yang's right arm, while looking at them all angelically, as if he had done nothing wrong. Il Seonchon asked Dr. Jiang Mayong with concern about Chunhyuk's current condition. Jiang Mayong calmly replied that he was fine after he had reset the major bones in place. At that moment, Il Seonchon clearly remembered the confrontation between Yun and Chunhyuk and how Yun had seemed more feral than a beast relying solely on instinct that night. He added to himself that Yun had looked like a seasoned general who had fought countless battles, something no young prince like Yun should possess. Jiang Mayong then turned to Yun and told him to come meet his second master, which surprised Il Seoncheon, who said he had never agreed to help. Jiang Mayong mocked Il Seoncheon, asking since when the great lawmaster had become so narrow-minded, which prompted Il Seoncheon to reply irritably that he had started it first. Jiang Mayong replied that he was simply annoyed in front of a bright-eyed, passionate disciple, and Il Seoncheon retorted that this disciple had ended up in trouble precisely because of his sharp tongue. Jiang Mayong smiled proudly, calling it eloquence, but inwardly questioned how Yun had managed to manipulate someone like Elder Yang so easily with mere words. He then turned to Il Seoncheon and asked seriously why he had joined them, saying his presence couldn't simply be to watch over them. Il Seoncheon coolly replied that his reason for being there was a private matter, which made Yun wonder in confusion if that secret had anything to do with them. Yun felt slightly uneasy, then sarcastically asked if he should leave them alone so they could talk more freely. On their way to the destination, Il Seoncheon voiced concern about how the mission had become more complicated and asked Jiang Mayong if someone might be interfering. The man replied seriously that the blood spear beast, who wielded only a single spear, had started moving from the north toward Myolkin territory. Both Yun and Jiang Mayong were surprised by this news, especially when Il Seoncheon confirmed that the Gwangyong Jiko clan had also started mobilizing. Jiang Mayong explained that this clan had been in a blood feud with the Myolkin clan for generations, and that the current leader of this clan was the one who had severed Jiang Sunho's arm. He continued that the Gwangyong clan had taken control of Myolkin's lands, prompting the palace master to approve an arrangement between them. The reason for this arrangement, he noted, was the celestial sun pill housed in the palace, a rare elixir no sect, righteous or evil, would refuse. The Celestial Palace traded this pill with righteous sects through the Gwangyong clan, one of the 12 constellation houses. However, Jiang Mayong expressed concern that the Gwangyong clan now seemed on the verge of breaching that agreement, which posed a serious threat to them. Il Seonchon added that it wasn't the entire clan approaching, but someone known as the Little Dragon. Yun curiously asked why this Little Dragon mattered, and whether the person was male or female. Jiang Mayong explained that the title was given only to those gifted in martial arts like dragons or phoenixes. It signified elite strength. When Yun asked if this person was a direct heir of the clan, Jiang Mayong confirmed that they likely were, and that was why they were joining the mission. Il Seoncheon then demanded Yun stop prying into his personal matters, only for Jiang Mayong to harshly tell him to be quiet. They finally arrived at an area called Songju, where Il Seoncheon said that the Myolkin clan would at least pretend to cooperate in hunting the blood spear beast. But a guard at the entrance firmly declared that no one from the palace would be allowed entry under any circumstance. He added that this was a direct order from the clan leader. Jiang Mayong was surprised by this response, and told them that this was a direct command from the palace master himself. The guard replied that he had received no official decree. Jiang Mayong then threatened him, saying the punishment would fall on him once the decree arrived, but the guard stubbornly held his ground. At that moment, Yun gently placed a hand on Jiang Mayong's shoulder and asked to handle the matter himself. The guard again refused them entry, but Yun moved with great speed and caught him off guard with a sudden attack. Yun delivered an incredibly powerful blow to the guard, causing him to crash to the ground in a shocking display, leaving everyone stunned. One person exclaimed in disbelief that Yun had sent the gatekeeper flying into the air from the sheer force of the strike. After Yun delivered the surprise blow to the gatekeeper, he explained to Dr. Jiang Mayong that words wouldn't help if they were clearly being obstructed. Jiang Mayong replied that perhaps there had been a mistake in sending the decree, especially since they had crossed the vast central plains. After a brief silence, Yun calmly suggested that if he and his master chose to enter by force, they would kill everyone and burn the place down, shocking Dr. Jiang Maiyong deeply. Jiang Maiyong was stunned by the harsh words and asked Yun seriously whether he was being genuine or just joking. But Yun smiled gently and replied that he was only joking, which surprised Jiang Maiyong even more and made him wonder if these were side effects from the chaos pill Yun had consumed. Yun explained that he hit the guard only because he was annoying, and that nothing serious would happen since he was the young master, adding with a smirk that since they hadn't received the decree, that made him the young master here. He then casually asked Jiang Maiyong to move toward Songju City, joking that the city was famous for its porcelain trade. Jiang Maiyong was astonished at Yun's attitude and commented that he truly was shameless. As they walked through the city streets, Jiang Maiyong asked Yun if he was upset about losing his title as a young master. Yun calmly replied that they'd find suitable lodging even without the Mokun branch. Jiang Maiyong jokingly asked if Yun wasn't planning to kill anyone as he claimed earlier. Yun confirmed once again that he had been joking. Later that night, Yun snuck out from their residence. Jiang Maiyong asked where he was going so late, and Yun simply replied that he wanted to get some fresh air. Yun explained to Jiang Maiyong that the next day they would receive information about the blood spear beast from Mokun, and that he would then begin his training in the trigram of life and death technique. He added that he had never left the Sun Palace before, and he didn't know how long it would take to learn such a difficult technique. Yun then said he was going out, mentioning he had heard that the city didn't enforce a night curfew. Jiang Maiyong sighed in disbelief at how freely Yun was acting, despite being new to the outside world. Before Yun left, Jiang Maiyong gave him some money to cover the night's expenses. Yun quietly thanked him. Jiang Maiyong seriously advised him to be cautious outside, warning that even someone without arms or legs could stab him if they really wanted to. He specifically warned him about the back alleys, especially on moonless nights. Yun assured him he would only go to the night market for a quick meal and return. Yun took a deep breath as he walked, enjoying the refreshing night breeze. As he wandered through the night market, he remembered Jiang Maiyong's warning not to go near the back alleys. Despite that, Yun confidently chose to head somewhere else, somewhere he felt he had to visit. He stood before that place in reflection, clearly remembering that it felt deeply familiar. Yun moved inside the place, feeling calm and focused. As he ventured further in, an old man appeared and told him the place was closed for the night. The old man added firmly that Yun didn't seem like the type of young master who typically came to places like this. Yun smiled calmly and said, "Blood doesn't wait for the right moment," which stirred suspicion in the old man. The old man asked if the blood Yun spoke of was his own. Yun smiled confidently and said the blood wasn't his, nor was it the old man's. He then pointed confidently to the sky and clearly declared that he wanted the blood of the yellow dragon, which shocked and confused the old man. The old man repeated the name Yellow Dragon with visible concern and trembling. The old man began preparing for a possible confrontation as his aura grew more tense and alert. Yun realized the man was getting ready to fight, and inwardly commented that even if a dragon's claws were removed, it would still sharpen its fangs. At that moment, a number of masked men appeared around them, and one of them ordered the old man to stop bringing up old stories in front of the young master. The old man looked at Yun sharply and said he didn't know what family he belonged to, but he would offer him his final respect. Yun calmly smiled and told the old man that he had already bowed to him twice, as if treating him like a dead man. Finally, he addressed the old man directly. "Lone Devil's Blade, Yun Namcheon," leaving the old man visibly shaken. Yun began to sense strange movement behind him as a masked man appeared, stealthily moving across the rooftop of the building opposite, silently observing him. At the same time, the elderly man also noticed the suspicious movement and began to feel visibly uneasy. Suddenly, a group of masked men attacked Yun all at once after receiving a direct order to kill him. The old man was startled, repeating in his mind that Yellow Dragon's blood was a code he hadn't heard in a very long time. During the fight, the old man noticed that Yun's footwork resembled a known style called Amhyonin, which deeply shocked him. Yun moved with astonishing speed and finesse, easily fending off the masked attackers. He then executed an extremely powerful counterattack, displaying incredible martial skill and unleashing a strong explosion of energy across the area. Yun appeared calm and composed afterward, as the energy of the heart of the sun began to visibly glow in his chest, impressing and astonishing the old man. The old man thought to himself that he had seen many masters in his life, but Yun was the only one who had ever made him feel such intense danger. At that moment, the old man ordered his masked men to draw their swords and prepare to fight seriously. But Yun calmly addressed the old man, "Gudok Jiang Mayonga," saying that continuing the battle would be far too dangerous for his men, and that it would be better to stop now. Gudokjang Myonga challenged Yun to go ahead and try, sarcastically adding that although Yun might have mastered a few techniques, he hadn't yet mastered true internal energy. Yun launched another fast and powerful attack, but Gudokjang Myonga confidently stated that such strikes wouldn't affect his men. Yun realized that Gudokjang Myonga's men were using a simple formation, which made him smile confidently. He had found his perfect opportunity. Yun began preparing and used the special martial art flame mirror known as the Bukra Chunwang style. He gathered energy intensely between his hands, preparing to unleash his rare technique. Gudokjang Myonga was deeply shocked upon seeing the technique and exclaimed in disbelief that it was impossible for Yun to use Bukra Chunwang. Yun continued focusing his energy, showing incredible control and powerful concentration. He then released a massive surge of solar energy toward his opponents. Yun declared powerfully that he was the warlord and unleashed a devastating attack. After the destructive strike ended, Yun approached the old man and asked if he was ready to talk now, leaving the man trembling in shock. Yun stepped closer to Gudokjang Myonga and repeated the name of the combat style, Bukra Chunwang, calmly, right in front of his face. The remaining masked men took a step back in fear and anticipation, waiting for their leader's reaction. Gudokjang Myonga, in utter shock, repeated that what had just happened was truly the legendary Bukra Chunwang technique. He then asked quietly if Yun's footwork also came from the Amhyonin style, and Yun confidently confirmed that it did. Gudokjang Myonga burst into loud laughter and exclaimed that Yun was completely insane, then demanded to know his true identity. Yun calmly smiled and replied that he thought this place didn't allow questions, surprised by Gudokjang Myonga's behavior. Gudokjang Myonga responded in astonishment. The 6 laws of Yukmu, commenting that it had been so long, he had nearly forgotten them. Finally, Gudokjang Myonga invited Yun into his home. Yun asked if he was serious about inviting someone in, even without knowing his name. Gudokjang Myonga replied that Yun had found the forgotten Gudokjang Myonga and had mentioned the code Yellow Dragon's Blood, and that was enough to earn his interest and make him listen. In the end, Yun entered the house, and Gudokjang Myonga said with a sarcastic kindness that his home probably didn't have anything to impress a young master like him. Yun began sipping his tea with a smile, and calmly said that just the scent of the tea was enough. Yun recalled the 6 rules of Yuk Momo, which state, no eyes, no ears, no nose, no mouth. He continued, recalling the rules. No sense of self, no sense of others, clarifying in his mind that this was the secret organization Yuk Momo, which was originally an ancient martial sect that took a different path from the Zhong Empire. At that time, the martial world was ruled by Confucians, but Yuk Momo was tamed through the loyalty of its master, Yun Namcheon. The members of Yuk Momo were like fierce wolves in their loyalty and devotion to their master. Later, Yuk Momo turned into an intelligence organization after the founding of the state. When Yun Namcheon withdrew from the front lines, he returned to his hometown of Songju, where he managed a pawn shop. Songju was a place of rest for Yun Namcheon, who had lived his life in the shadows. In the past, Yun Namcheon had promised his comrades that if they were ever able to rest, they would sit together, drink tea, and watch the ocean. Yun remembered that Namcheon used to make tea in unclean cups, which led his comrades to jokingly mock the poor quality of the tea. Yun smiled in contemplation, wondering to himself if Namcheon had aged significantly since those days. In his memory, Yun clearly recalled the image of Namcheon as a young man criticizing the poor tea, as well as his current image, aged, drinking tea. Namcheon sarcastically commented on Yun's current skill level, saying that while he might manage to use the Amhyonin technique, the Byokra Cheonhwang style was beyond his capabilities. Then Namcheon asked Yun how his body was and how he felt, to which Yun replied sarcastically, telling him not to worry about him before trying to kill him again. Namcheon smiled and sarcastically remarked that Yun had tried to kill him in the past, yet here they were now, drinking tea together. He then said that he didn't enjoy watching his comrades drink tea while coughing up blood. Yun simply replied that he should bring a bucket since that would be better than vomiting on the floor. Yun remembered internally that using martial arts beyond one's level causes severe internal injuries, but he reassured himself that thanks to his mastery of the solar heart technique, he would fully recover by tomorrow. Normally, it would take a full year of treatment and elixirs to recover, but Yun convinced himself that this would benefit him in the long run in reaching the sovereign body of the sun and moon. After a brief exchange of banter, Namcheon asked Yun seriously why he had come to see him. Yun thought to himself that Namcheon probably suspected he was connected to the warlord, but he felt it wasn't time yet to reveal the truth. Yun reminded himself that he couldn't yet disclose that he was the warlord himself, Seon Hua Yun. Yun smiled mysteriously. and told Namcheon that he came because he had some questions to ask. Yun calmly said that he wanted to know about the warlord, Seon Hua Yun. Namcheon was surprised by the question and said seriously that it was obvious Yun hadn't come to hear the well-known stories about the warlord. He added quietly that anyone who knew about the yellow dragon blood and about himself surely wasn't an ordinary person. Namcheon then explained that the warlord first appeared at the end of the Central Plains War. He confirmed that after the Western Wars ended, peace was supposed to come. But at that time, the ancient evil dragon awoke, intending to devour the world. Then, the warlord declared he would stop that evil. Namcheon said that this was the story told by the emperor and the six lords, although he didn't know the whole truth. Yun asked if the warlord had truly died in battle against the evil dragon. Namcheon formally answered that the warlord was officially recorded as missing, said to have descended with the evil dragon into the depths of the earth. Since then, the royal family has held a festival every autumn to pray for the warlord. Yun smiled and commented that the story was created for a reason. It was a beautiful tale of a man who fought fiercely and sacrificed himself for peace. Then Yun asked Namcheon seriously if he truly believed that the warlord had fallen with the evil dragon into the depths of the earth. Namcheon paused for a moment and then said that Yun's manner of speaking felt strangely familiar to him, that he made others speak at length, only to intervene at the most crucial moment. Namcheon then smiled and said that the warlord was known among them as the chatty warlord, and remarked that he now saw the same impudence in Yun. He then said that the Byokra Cheonhwang style was used only by the top masters of fire mirror techniques, while Amhaonin was known to only a very few. He added that the only person known to have mastered and used both techniques was the warlord himself. But he then pointed out that 15 years later, someone else had appeared using the Byokra Cheonhwang style again. Yun asked if Namcheon thought he was connected to the warlord, and Namcheon replied that Yun was mistaken and that he had only come to get free information. Namcheon explained that the yellow dragon blood blade was a secret known only to the royal family and the Seven Sword Peaks, and only they knew of its presence in that location. In the end, Namcheon said he wouldn't ask or answer any more questions, but he had already sent his men to uncover Yun's true identity. Yun smirked and said that Namcheon was truly generous. Namcheon replied that he should answer Yun's question first, and clarified that after the battle, he had gone personally to Nawaguk, and even if it were a legendary dragon, it would be impossible for the warlord to be defeated by it. He continued his explanation, stating that despite everything they searched for after the warlord's disappearance, all they found were traces of explosions estimated at 2,000 guan and remnants of martial techniques that only the warlord himself could have used, but no trace of a dragon's body or scales. Namcheon then added that since the warlord disappeared, the seven masters returned to their provinces and became regional lords, without making any notable moves since. Even the Sword King, Sang Weibok, had remained silent in his residence in Changrang for years, specifically since the warlord vanished. He added that no one could say for sure whether the warlord disappeared of his own will or was forced into it. Yun thought to himself that this man was indeed the Namcheon he remembered. Namcheon then asked Yun seriously if he sought revenge as the warlord's successor. Yun smiled and said that was what the old man thought. Then Namcheon asked directly if the warlord was still alive. Yun replied calmly that he didn't know if the warlord was alive or not, but inside, he reaffirmed to himself that he was the warlord. When the old man asked what relationship Yun had with the warlord, Yun replied directly that there was no connection, but internally he said, "I am the warlord, Namcheon." The old man was silent for a moment, then quietly said he would believe Yun's words this time. He then asked Yun to smile, saying he wanted to see him happy, the happiness the warlord could never attain. Yun smiled softly and told the old man he understood what he meant, and inside, he resolved to honor that wish. After that, the old man took out a small box and handed it to Yun, saying it was his final gift to him. Yun asked anxiously why he sounded like someone preparing to depart. Namcheon asked if Yun knew about the organization Jeonryong Jihai, explaining that it was where the best members of Yuk Momo gathered to collect and analyze information. He added that he had created his own version of this organization. Yun held the documents in astonishment, repeating the name Jeonryong Jihai with clear surprise at what he was hearing. Namcheon explained that since he couldn't accompany Yun, he would send someone else in his place, and pointed to a person who suddenly appeared behind Yun, introducing her as Sibir Yang. Yun looked toward the figure behind him in confusion, wondering if he was really supposed to take with him the person who had just pointed a sword at him. The old man assured him that this person would be very useful to him. Yun agreed, saying he would do so. As he turned to leave, the old man said there was something else Yun needed. He smiled faintly and asked Yun if he didn't need information about Songju City, calling him fourth young master of the Sun Palace. Yun was stunned to realize the old man had already discovered this, thinking to himself that this was the expected level of the Yuk Momo organization. Elsewhere, a commander named Gong, a leader in the Mugen Association, commented that Yun was extremely stubborn, noting that despite his level, he had dared to speak boldly before the palace master using only mental strength. The senior commander was shocked by Yun's mental fortitude, which allowed him to withstand the palace master's presence despite lacking martial power, wondering if a tiger cub remained a tiger in the end. This commander turned to Wing Lord Gong and asked what he thought should be done about Yun. Wing Lord Gong began a lengthy preface about the region's history and the importance of the Mugen organization. But another commander cut him off, urging him to skip to the point. Gong responded clearly that if it were up to him, he would send squad leader Chong Miui to eliminate the fourth young master in revenge for second young master Ji Chun-hyuk. Chong Miui replied firmly that he would tear him apart if he got his hands on him. But another commander warned against reckless action, citing the presence of the palace master's two powerful arms, Maui and Bok Mujon, which could provoke the master's wrath upon them. Wing Lord Gong suggested simply carrying out the attack in a way that couldn't be traced back to them, just as others had done before, attacking and then denying any involvement. One of the commanders asked if the doctor would discover their scheme easily. Gong replied that they just needed to keep him occupied for a while. Another commander wondered how they could manage that. Should they injure someone to force Maui to move? Gong replied that they had their own doctors. But to force Jiang Mayong into action, they would need something very specific, and proposed using the Amcheon poison. Gong confirmed that if one of their men were poisoned with Amcheon, Maui would be forced to intervene, even if he normally refused to. He concluded by wondering aloud if the palace master had deliberately sent them the fourth young master, Hua Yun, as a gift. The group of leaders were discussing the fate of the fourth young master. Gong coldly asserted that the fourth young master was meant to be used as a sacrifice in the Yan Dan ritual anyway. Miwei responded enthusiastically in agreement and said he was ready to slice the fourth young master like fish fillets. A third leader explained that they would not send just one leader, Chung Miwei, but also deploy the Tamjo unit with him to ensure success. He then added that the first sacrifice is usually difficult, but the second one becomes easier. After that, the leader firmly declared that blood must be repaid with blood and ordered both the Hulabarang unit and the Tamjo unit to move immediately to start the operation. Elsewhere, in a spacious hall, Dr. Jang Myung appeared, calmly telling Yun, who was approaching him, that he was late. Yun immediately replied that they should attack the Mogollon Association, which surprised Dr. Jang Myung, who sharply asked the reason for that. He questioned why Yun would attack the Mogollon Association and whether it was the same organization he had clashed with the previous night. Yun corrected his assumption, clarifying that he meant the Mogollon Association his master was thinking of. The doctor confirmed that he knew very well it was the greatest power under the Sun Palace. Yun asked sharply and with concern why he wanted to attack the Mogollon Association, which was considered a major force. Yun calmly replied that he had discovered something important the previous night. Jang Myung asked in amazement how he managed to discover something so quickly in just one night after leaving the Sun Palace for the first time. Yun replied that he would explain later, but first, he asked him to listen carefully to what he had to say now. The doctor agreed and asked him to begin, so Yun directly asked if he knew when the blood-robed demon first appeared in Seongju City. The doctor answered that it was about a year ago, so Yun asked if anything specific happened at that time. Jang Myung answered thoughtfully that he had indeed been requested by the Haeryong Merchant Guild, affiliated with the third young master Chun Han, to treat someone who had been poisoned. He explained that he refused to go because he knew the patient was beyond saving, and the guild avoided entering the Mogollon region to prevent conflicts. Yun clearly explained that the Mogollon Association trusts the second young master, and the Haeryong Merchant Guild trusts the third young master. He questioned what would happen if a ship from the Merchant Guild had arrived in Seongju at that time. The doctor was surprised at Yun's ability to know these details and wondered internally whether he had learned this from orthodox factions or somewhere else. He then added that, aside from that instance, he had never heard of any prior interaction between the Merchant Guild and the Mogollon Association. Yun asked Dr. Jang Myung again why he believed it was poisoning at the time. The doctor answered that he had heard a description of the patient's condition. His body was covered in black spots, and black blood was bleeding from all facial openings, clear signs of poisoning. He also proposed another possibility, demonic energy or a powerful curse, but noted that it was strange for such a thing to happen under those circumstances. Then Yoon plainly stated that Dr. Jang Myung didn't like the Haryong Merchant Guild because there was something suspicious about them. The doctor replied that he understood the seriousness of what Yoon was implying. Yoon continued his explanation, saying that a merchant guild coming to a distant place like Seongju must have been trading something special, most likely something very dangerous. The doctor confirmed his conclusion, saying that what Yoon meant was that someone from the Haryong Merchant Guild had been poisoned because of that object, and the Mogollon Association had already purchased it. Yoon responded that he was right. Yoon thought to himself, admiring the doctor's intelligence and insight, believing that someone with such capabilities shouldn't remain hidden in a corner of the Central Plains. The doctor went on, saying that the blood-robed demon appeared in Seongju because he was after that very object. Yoon confirmed the accuracy of his words. Then the doctor asked Yoon if he truly intended to attack the Mogollon Association. Yoon replied that eliminating the source was the easiest way to end the problem. The doctor acknowledged that the idea was tempting and logical, but pointed out that the problem was the lack of evidence. They didn't even know what the Mogollon Association had purchased. Yoon thought to himself, confirming that he knew exactly what the object was, and that it originally belonged to warlord Sion Hwayon. He then explained that the object was the legendary weapon forged from the demonic sword that once drowned the Central Plains in blood centuries ago, known as Amcheon Ilgwang, or Dark Demonic Sword of Heaven. The doctor confirmed that this weapon consumed everyone who tried to possess it, and the only person who could wield it was the warlord himself. But after the warlord's disappearance, the weapon was shattered and scattered into separate pieces of demonic energy, the Amcheon fragments. The doctor added that one of those fragments was now in Seongju, and that was the information the fourth young master needed to know. Finally, Yoon thought to himself that if the demonic energy of that fragment really existed, he would feel it the moment he entered the Mogollon Association's main building. Then he said quietly that there was a way to find out once they arrived. But at that moment, they were interrupted by a knock on the door. A man appeared at the door, and Dr. Jang Myung asked who the visitor was. The man replied that he was from the Mogollon Association and sincerely apologized for the events of the previous day. He quickly explained the reason for his sudden visit, saying he urgently needed to see Dr. Jang Myung, which surprised Jang Myung and made him question the reason. The man then revealed with great concern that one of his squad leaders had been poisoned, and black blood was coming out of his 7 orifices, stressing that it was an emergency. The man insisted they move quickly, prompting Jang Myung to nervously ask who the poisoned person was that had caused such urgency. When the man couldn't answer due to strict orders, Dr. Jang Myung refused to go with him, explaining that he couldn't help without knowing the details. The man sighed, admitting that strict orders had come from his commander, and that he was aware of how deeply their young master had been affected by the injury previously inflicted by the fourth young master. When Jang Myung asked if it had anything to do with the current situation, the man responded that the poisoned individuals were now the gate guard and Dr. Su Ra-hyung, Jang Myung's close friend. Yoon was puzzled, wondering if it was just a coincidence that another doctor close to Jang Myung had been poisoned at this exact time. The man continued explaining that they had taken the poisoned gate guard to the association to be examined by Dr. Su, but it turned out both the doctor and the guard were poisoned and black blood was seeping from their bodies. Jang Myung decided to go immediately, saying that if the situation was this serious, he would take the fourth young master with him and investigate the matter. The man quickly intervened and explained that the young master could not enter the Mogollon Association's main building. Dr. Jang Myung became angry at this strange reply and protested, saying that the special official also belonged to the Sun Palace. How could they deny him entry? The man clearly explained that the reason for the restriction was that the association could not guarantee the fourth young master's safety if he entered the main building. Jang Myung strongly objected to this and considered it an insult to the association, firmly denouncing the action. The man calmly said the issue was that they feared the fourth young master would attack upon seeing the second young master, Ji Chun-hyuk, and confirmed that Dr. Su was in critical condition. But Jang Myung insisted that he couldn't go without bringing the special official with him. At that moment, Yoon quietly stepped in and said he could go alone. Yoon smiled confidently, saying he wasn't a child, and questioned what trouble could possibly occur on Mogollon Association's grounds while he was by himself. Jang Myung agreed but advised him that if anything happened, he should go straight to the head of security, Yeol Byup Gyeonjo. After Jang Myung left, Yoon sat alone, contemplating the possibility of something dangerous happening. But deep inside, he felt a rain of blood approaching him. Suddenly, sharp arrows pierced the room where Yoon was sitting, causing an explosion and thick smoke. Yoon stood calmly in the middle of the chaos, ready to face whatever danger was coming, and resolved to turn that blood into the blood of his enemies. He then called out to Sibir Young, and calmly asked her about the current situation. Sibir Young replied that half of the Hula Barang group and the Tamjo unit had begun moving, and all personnel in the area were being replaced. Yoon asked about the nature of the Tamjo unit, and Sibir Young explained that they were a mix between an intelligence group and an assassination unit, focusing more on information gathering and covert operations rather than direct assassinations. Yoon frankly asked Sibir Young what she thought were the odds of him getting out of this situation alive. Sibir Young remained silent for a moment, so Yoon asked her to be honest. Then Yoon proposed a wager to Sibir Young. He would bet on staying alive, while she would bet on his death. He added that if he won, Sibir Young would have to answer his questions. Sibir Young responded with surprise, saying it didn't seem like anything would change even if Yoon survived. Yoon answered with a confident smile that the reason was simple, because he was going to win anyway. Sibir Young remained silent without responding, then quickly left the place without saying another word. Yoon began to feel toxic smoke spreading around him, quickly realizing that it wasn't deadly, but rather a paralyzing gas meant to immobilize him. He then understood that whoever released the smoke intended to kill him directly, confirming they were closing in fast. But Yoon smiled confidently, knowing well that the core of the sun within him rendered poisons completely ineffective against him. Suddenly a masked man appeared, moving at lightning speed, attempting to strike Yoon by taking advantage of the spreading smoke. The masked man attacked fiercely, but Yoon spun with incredible speed, skillfully dodging the strike. The attacker shouted in astonishment that Yoon remained unharmed despite the surprise attack, which made him anxious. With overwhelming speed, Yoon grabbed the masked man's wrist as he tried to strike again, ready to teach him a harsh lesson. With extreme calm, Yoon broke the attacker's wrist, causing him to drop his weapon in unbearable pain. Yoon skillfully and confidently picked up the sword that had fallen from the man's hand, preparing to use it to block the upcoming attacks. He looked closely at the blade, its reflection glowing in his eyes, fully prepared for the decisive battle ahead. At that moment, a group of other masked assailants attacked simultaneously, shouting angrily and demanding his death. But Yoon showed no concern for their screams and began moving with astonishing calm and fluidity, easily dodging all of their strikes. Yoon then launched a powerful counterattack, adding immense weight to his strike, which he called the slash. He followed up with another combat technique, adding tremendous speed to his successive blows, reaching the peak of his fighting speed. Yoon easily eliminated many of his enemies, using the sword with exceptional skill that brought them down one after another. Meanwhile, drops of blood were falling from the edge of the sword in Yoon's hand, and he remarked that the fate of any weapon is to grow heavier the more it is soaked in blood. Yoon then confirmed to himself that the destiny awaiting him as Warlord Huayan is to feed his weapon with the blood of his enemies. The remaining attackers immediately began to retreat, screaming in fear, "Fall back, and everyone withdraw." But Yoon told them with calm sarcasm that if they wanted to stay alive, they should clearly beg him for mercy. He added even more mockingly that they could ask him to spare their lives from death like stray dogs, and let them live. Yoon shouted, calling them worse than dogs. He smirked as he faced them with confidence, remarking that despite the weakness of his internal energy, he could execute every movement in sync with the pulses of the heart of the sun inside him. Elsewhere, Dr. Jang Myung stood before someone lying on a bed and accused the man standing nearby of deceiving him. The man replied calmly that he had no other choice. Jang Myung then asked about the condition of Dr. Su Ra-hyung. The man replied that Dr. Su was in his usual place, as he was a person of great value to the Mogollon Association. Then Jang Myung angrily asked who he was. The man calmly introduced himself as Jeon-young, the commander of the Tamjo unit from the Mogollon Association. Jang Myung seriously asked if their commander Jang Soon was aware of these events, but Jeon-young refused to give a clear answer and said he could not disclose that. Jeon-young then explained that the matter was related to Commander Jang Soon's own decision because Huayan had harmed his grandson, the second young master. Jang Myung fell silent for a moment, regretting not having taught Yoon the life and death technique sooner, fearing an organized attack by a professional unit against Yoon. At that moment, a man rushed into the room, shouting that the deputy commander of the unit had started moving first with members of the assassination squad. Jeon-young responded angrily, saying he had ordered them to wait, and asked about the status of the Hulabarang group. The man replied that he didn't know yet, and Jeon-young ordered him to report immediately if anything new happened. Jang Myung said that things were not going according to plan. However, Jeon-young replied confidently that there would be no problem dealing with the fourth young master. Jang Myung responded sharply, asking if he wasn't afraid of the consequences of what they were doing. Jeon-myung smirked and said he didn't expect to hear such words from Dr. Jang Myung, adding cryptically that they knew very well the circumstances under which the fourth young master's mother had died. A terrifying black aura surrounded the doctor as he coldly declared that he would certainly go to hell one day. But it seemed Jiang Myung would arrive there first. Jian Myung responded with confidence, saying that if the man wanted his life, he was ready to give it to him. But the doctor mocked him, saying his life wasn't worth much, and that he wouldn't accept it even if it were offered in a jar. Jian Myung then sarcastically asked if the fourth young master planned to take his head himself. Jiang Myung replied coolly, maybe. Jian Myung laughed mockingly and said that he definitely wouldn't, expressing his anticipation of what was to come. He smiled and told Jiang Myung that he would remember his words well, especially since the life of this special official was about to end. He then revealed that the poisoned person was actually the gate guard, not Dr. Su, and suggested Jiang Myung examine him just for fun. After leaving, Jiang Myung thought to himself that the Tamzhou unit should be led by the fourth young master. He remembered that he had been told earlier that Bok Mujun was nearby, and meeting him might help solve this issue. Jiang Myung also realized that he needed to verify the fourth young master's hypothesis, the one that had managed to create a situation that forced Jiang Myung to act. He felt anxious and tense, having not expected the Mogollon Association to behave with such aggression. He wondered internally if the Lord of the Palace had anticipated this. He also questioned whether the Lord had deliberately sent the fourth young master to Seongju, which was under the association's control. Meanwhile, Yoon stood among a group of defeated men, sarcastically commenting that he was used to seeing the second young master in such a position, and proudly added that it was he who had done that to him. One of the association men grew furious at Yoon's insult toward the second young master and shouted angrily at his insolent tongue. With a mocking smile, Yoon confirmed to himself how easy it was to provoke them. Despite the weakness of his internal energy, he couldn't use his full techniques, but this was enough for now. He then released a terrifying dark energy around him, causing panic among the surrounding men who screamed in fear, shouting that he was using mahjong, a forbidden combat art. Yoon mocked them, saying that in this era, what did it matter whether he used mahjong or jingjong? He added that even the Sun Palace was a branch of the demon sect, so it was only natural to use this kind of energy. One of the men admitted that he hadn't expected the need to use the Hulabarang force, thinking the fourth young master was just a weakling with no internal energy. The commander ordered his men to withdraw quickly and return to executing the original plan they had devised. Yoon sighed as he stood confidently in the middle of the battlefield, calmly holding his sword after the danger had temporarily passed. On the other side, Yoon noticed the city's residents and wondered if they were used to seeing such strange things or if they only feared them when it involved the association. Life began gradually returning to normal in the market as merchants resumed selling their goods as if nothing had happened. Yoon paused for a moment, sensing a familiar scent that made him remain cautious despite everything. A small boy approached him, offering to sell him a hot pie with an innocent smile. Yoon quietly agreed and gave the boy money, asking him to take half of the pie as well. But the boy refused, saying he wasn't hungry. Suddenly, Yoon gripped his sword menacingly and asked the boy if he could open his stomach to check for himself whether he was really full. Yoon launched a sudden and swift strike toward the boy, who leapt back just in time, barely dodging the attack. After that, Yoon took a bite of the pie, sarcastically commenting on its odd shape, and clearly stated that it contained a strong poison this time. Despite the poison, Yoon reaffirmed to himself that toxins didn't affect him because of the core of the sun. He wrote a secret message on the ground, certain that Yoon Namcheon would understand what he had written. He then received a message from Sibir Young, informing him that Bok Mujun was waiting for him at the Deryu Huangryongsa Temple, 700 steps to the south. Yoon smiled confidently, assuring himself that if he met Bok Mujun alive, that would be his true victory, though he realized he still needed to be wary of another sudden ambush. Yoon began to feel that the night would be very long, and he knew well that this would be a night of their victory, not his own. Elsewhere in his memory, Yoon stood in a field full of destruction and fire, surrounded by the scattered bodies of his enemies. He looked exhausted and was covered in wounds. He stared ahead with deep sorrow as he heard a voice calling to him gently and sadly. His brother Lim approached him, expressing concern that even their allies had stopped fighting upon seeing him. He urged Yoon to use his signature combat technique if he wasn't planning to now. Yoon smiled with deep sadness and told him that if even their children were this hesitant, imagine how the children of their enemies must feel. He added that if he moved again, at least their children would survive. Lim cried out in sorrow and anger, saying he didn't want to keep calling him the blood dog or the demon of hell anymore. Yoon responded firmly, reminding Lim that this was their life. He asked if he remembered their early days when they started from the outskirts of the Yungwon region. Yoon continued sorrowfully, explaining that none of the 300 men they once led remained, and that the souls of 30,000 people now rested on both of their shoulders. He looked at his blood-stained hands and said with deep regret that no matter how much he washed them, he could never get rid of the lingering scent of blood. Lim began to cry, and Yoon told him with deep sorrow that he was very sorry. Yoon smiled sadly and told Lim not to cry. He wasn't covered in blood like him, so he should smile instead. He then said that he had killed countless people with his tongue and mind alone, so Lim should stop feeling guilty. Yoon finished his words with firm resolve, saying that all the curses and bloodshed would be his burden alone. He explained that the fastest way to end a world soaked in blood was for him to bear it all. Lim trembled in grief and said his heart couldn't bear seeing Yoon like this. He asked how Yoon could care so little for himself. Yoon approached Lim and placed a hand on his shoulder, sternly reminding him that he had said it many times. It was his duty to end the war and bring peace. He emphasized that his role was to protect the world's peace. Then Yoon looked at Lim with a smile and confidently told him that he trusted him. As he recalled these memories, Yoon began unleashing a powerful attack, surrounded by a terrifying violet aura, declaring clearly that all he could do was kill and destroy, that he was no different from a vampire. He continued his assault with violent force, drawing out the life and souls of his enemies, which made them hunger for more, creating a horrific cycle that gradually turned them into deformed creatures. Fortunately, he discovered that this black energy did not conflict with the power of the sun within him. Instead, it coexisted like oil and water, without mixing. Yoon looked up toward the enemy commander and mocked him, saying even the old lady had joined the attack, and asked sarcastically if he was planning to join in as well. The commander trembled in fear and anxiety, asking Yoon nervously if he was really the fourth young master. Yoon mocked him, saying, "What else would I be but the fourth young master?" Then added with sarcasm that if the commander wanted to let his men die, he should do it himself, or Yoon would come up there himself. The commander shouted angrily that Yoon was an evil demon. Yoon replied coldly and mockingly that the real demon was the one sacrificing his followers like this. The commander began to feel extremely anxious, realizing that things were spiraling out of control and that after deceiving the old swordmaster, there was no turning back. They had to see the mission through to the end. A group of fighters charged at Yoon, screaming warnings to alert him of the danger. The commander smirked and threatened that he would kill Yoon with everything he had. But Yoon stood firm and smiled coldly, calmly commenting that this attack was nothing but a cowardly act. The fighters rushed toward Yoon shouting, "Jane! Hit him!" in an attempt to bring him down quickly. At that moment, energy burst from Yoon with overwhelming force, causing a devastating explosion around him. Yoon launched a decisive strike with his sword, unleashing a powerful wave of blood and energy around him as he attacked with full confidence. Finally, Yoon declared confidently, calling upon the fire larvae, fully prepared to face the next threat. Yoon began his assault with immense force, leaping high into the air and delivering a powerful strike that caused a massive explosion on the ground around his enemies. He then landed swiftly and skillfully, holding his weapon as he evaded attacks from enemies trying to strike from all directions. Yoon continued his assault with agile and powerful movements, expertly using his sword to deflect enemy blows and strike back with all his might. He moved with astonishing speed, channeling the dark energy surrounding him to unleash a devastating blow that shook the area with its sheer power. Yoon raised his hand toward the sky, summoning powerful lightning bolts that surged into his weapon, which began to absorb this overwhelming energy. His eyes glowed with lightning as he directed his terrifying aura, preparing to unleash his finishing blow on his enemies. Yoon released his unique combat technique called Brain Thunder, triggering massive explosions and deadly bolts that terrified his foes. From afar, a commander in a large building witnessed the events unfolding and was shocked, repeatedly muttering in disbelief that he was being targeted. The commander's face turned tense as he muttered to himself, "No," realizing that things had spiraled out of his control. Lord of Law, Seo Cheon, was also observing the events. Meanwhile, another commander ordered his troops to regroup in teams of 3, trying to regain control of the battlefield. Yoon stood in the middle of the battlefield, carefully scanning his surroundings, prepared to face any incoming attack. The other commander watched Yoon, intrigued by his strange power, noting that he had used an unknown spell that multiplied his strength. He was impressed by Yoon's use of lightning and destructive energy, though he assumed Yoon's strength must now be drained. Just as the commander prepared to declare victory, he suddenly felt another presence nearby, causing him to startle and exclaim, "What?" Yoon appeared before him with a calm expression, and a voice asked coldly whether he needed any help, leaving the commander completely stunned. Yoon turned toward someone who suddenly appeared behind him and asked coldly why they were there. It was a mysterious girl who replied calmly with a confident smile that she was merely passing through by coincidence. She explained that she was headed toward the large building, as she had a scheduled appointment there. Yoon asked her calmly and steadily for her name. The girl kindly introduced herself as Hua Yun, adding that she was an unwelcome guest in Seongju City and didn't know where to go. Internally, Yoon was surprised by her sudden appearance and realized it was impossible that this was just a coincidence, especially during a bloody battle like this. The girl sensed that the confrontation had reached its peak and began to prepare seriously for what was coming. She spun a long red ribbon around her with graceful speed, readying herself for battle. She told him confidently that he could trust her, but he responded bluntly that he wasn't interested in her skills. He simply wanted to know whether she was a friend or an enemy. She replied with a calm smile that she could still be his ally, prompting him to ask why. She gently explained that the people trying to kill him were also trying to kill her, prompting one of the enemies to comment that they had never tried to kill a woman like her before. Yoon asked whether the person she wanted to meet was located at the top of the tower, and she confirmed that she had an appointment there that she couldn't turn down. She added that this person was surely observing the situation, and that she couldn't ignore visiting the northern region of the Sun Palace, especially given the prominence of its name. Suddenly, a group of warriors appeared and began to confront Yoon and the girl, declaring that if she had an appointment with Bimo Jin, then she must be Nalanshu of the Radiant Dragon Tiger. Yoon realized that he and the girl were now in the same position, both on their way to meet the same person, but these warriors were trying to stop them. She smiled and gently added that she was glad he was finally starting to believe her. Yoon replied bluntly that he saw their relationship as more of a deal than trust, and sarcastically asked if she was afraid of blood. Hua Yun Lian said she would take care of half of them, and it was clearly announced that he would handle the other half of the enemies, expressing his admiration for the idea. Yoon charged toward the enemies with all his strength, while Hua Yun confidently said she would take care of the rest. From a high place, one of the dignified individuals wondered if the reason behind the appearance of the Master of Combat was that young man Yoon. Seo Cheon added that the title Master of Combat was more than he deserved, and asked that he be called simply Northern Combat Master. He calmly raised his hand under the rain and said that the young man was the boy who summons the wind. But the problem, according to him, was that the wind was filled with the scent of blood. The other person asked if that boy was his disciple. Seo Cheon replied that he hadn't taught him yet, and the other smiled with relief and said that was good. Seo Cheon asked why he felt relieved, and he replied that the boy would die at his hands today, so he wouldn't have grown attached to him yet. It turned out that this person was the leader of the Silent Cloud sect, Cheong Mui, and he spoke with absolute confidence that he would kill Yun. The Northern Combat Master looked at him calmly and sarcastically asked if he thought he wouldn't stop him from doing so. Cheong Mui began to think to himself that although he had exchanged blows with him before, he still hadn't reached his level. Cheong Mui continued, saying that he knew well the Northern Combat Master only attacked if the opponent was guilty, and that had always been the case. He added that the wounds of the past had not yet healed, and that too much blood had been spilled to forget the memories so easily. Seo Cheon continued by saying that the Silent Cloud sect had wanted to reach the level of the Flower Realm, and Mui responded that, meanwhile, the Sun Palace had sought influence in the south, which they had agreed on from the beginning. But after 20 years they had gained nothing, while the leader of the Jisangzhen sect had managed to reach the Flower Realm despite being just a peak-level warrior. Cheong Mui continued that he had endured it all, thinking things would improve when Ji Chun-hyuk became the sect leader. But Chun-hyuk had been severely injured by Yun to the extent that he might never return as sect leader, which is why Cheong Mui had remained calm. Seo Cheon asked if the reason he stayed was only for the sect and for that young master, affirming that he would have left otherwise. Cheong Mui smiled and said he admired the Northern Combat Master because he was decisive and clear, and so he had prepared a gift for him. At that moment, lightning struck powerfully in the sky above the palace, increasing the tension of the scene. Cheong Mui said that the gift he had prepared would show its value when those who were lured began to appear. They watched Yun from afar as he fought with everything he had, and Cheong Mui said he had given the young master a chance to live a little longer. But the Northern Combat Master replied that what he meant by a good gift was that it might allow them to see the true sunrise. The Northern Combat Master confirmed that the sect leader was the sun, but in reality, he was merely someone approaching it, not the sun itself. Cheong Mui was shocked and angrily asked if he meant that the sect leader's attainment of the Flower Realm wasn't legitimate. Then he asked anxiously if that seemingly useless boy, referring to Yun, was truly the one who would reach the real Sun Realm. Meanwhile, Yun was fighting fiercely, astonishingly defeating enemies with ease. Yun raised his sword high with great power, ready to deliver his decisive strike. Yun unleashed a massive attack filled with lightning and energy, causing the entire area to shake violently. Yun stood in the middle of the battlefield and looked upward, addressing the Northern Combat Master, saying that he hoped he was watching him well. Then he continued with strength and confidence, shouting the name Northern Combat Master. Chiang Moi screamed in terror, "No!" realizing within himself that Yun was the true son that had emerged in the midst of this chaotic battle. In the end, Chiang Moi asked the Northern Combat Master in utter shock how long he had known that the young master was this exceptional. Chiang Moi began to wonder inwardly whether Ji Chun Hyuk's defeat had been destined all along. The mysterious Hua Yun launched forward at incredible speed, attacking her opponents with her long red sleeves, causing them to fall to the ground from the sheer force of her strikes. One of the enemy men shouted firmly, ordering everyone to attack Yun and capture him quickly. But Yun unleashed his terrifying power with a swift and sudden movement that stunned his attackers, leaving them unable to respond. Yun looked utterly terrifying as he moved with incredible speed, leaving behind the scattered corpses of his enemies on the ground. One of the remaining fighters trembled as he described Yun as a demon after witnessing his terrifying power. Yun advanced toward his enemies with a cold smile, sarcastically commenting that they were still repeating those pathetic words despite the death of their comrades. One of the enemies cried out in panic and intense fear, warning Yun not to mock the dead, but Yun ignored his words and dashed toward him in a flash, wielding his sword while his eyes blazed with dark energy as he unleashed the Dark Soul Blade technique. With a single decisive strike, Yun cut down his opponent, thinking to himself that choosing to kill someone is a decision not unlike choosing one's own death. As the number of Yun's victims increased, so did the power of his terrifying aura, now known as the Master of 1,000 Bloods. Yun felt within himself that if he kept fighting this way, he might reach the peak of absolute power, and then asked his opponent if he had any last words. His opponent stood bravely in front of Yun, saying it was only the beginning, raising his sword in preparation for battle. Yun mocked the Silent Cloud sect, commenting that he thought they were stronger and was almost disappointed in them. From afar, one of the senior leaders began to realize what the Demon Master had meant when he spoke earlier, commenting with concern that things were starting to make sense now. The enemy commander smiled confidently, deciding that he would not die alone and that he would take Yun with him to the grave. The mysterious Hua Yun asked Yun if she should intervene to help him, but Yun calmly refused, insisting on facing his opponent himself as a man. Yun said that his opponent had placed his life on his sword, so he must do the same as well. The two began preparing for the decisive battle amid intense tension as Hua Yun silently observed the situation. Yun's eyes glowed with a terrifying red energy as he resolved to end the fight with a single decisive blow, just as his opponent intended. The opponent charged forward at tremendous speed through the heavy rain and the surging energy, preparing to unleash the 400 cutting strike technique. Yun responded calmly and confidently that he had not yet fully regained his former power, but he would show his opponent the power of the Annihilation Blade. The two fighters' strikes collided with immense force, causing a violent shockwave and a massive explosion in the area. A severe wound appeared on the enemy's body, splitting him in half, yet he commented with a final smile that it was perfect. His body then collapsed tragically before Yun's overwhelming power. Hua Yun stood in silence and awe as she watched the end of this fierce battle. Yun sat on the ground with difficulty and picked up his sword again, affirming that it wasn't over yet. He told Hua Yun that what had just happened was only the beginning, reminding her that the opponent had said so himself. Hua Yun began to ask Yun if it was really a good idea to have used all that power. Yun answered her calmly and firmly that it was worth it, explaining that if he could have used his power without limits, he wouldn't have hesitated. But he had to exhaust all the Master of 1,000 Bloods energy he had in order to defeat the enemy. Yun thought to himself that he had finally realized Hua Yun's true identity, then turned to her with a slight smile and asked her directly if he was right. Yun continued, explaining that this Hua Yun was from the Scarlet Dragon clan Juko, and her real name was Little Dragon Myung Hon. Surprise appeared on Hua Yun's face as she stared at Yun without saying a word. After a short silence, Hua Yun smiled and asked in astonishment if he really meant that she was a bright little dragon. Hua Yun laughed and jokingly said that when she wore her disguise, no one recognized her, and since she didn't speak, no one recognized her voice either, making Yun sarcastically wonder in his mind how they didn't recognize her distinctive black eyes. She then smiled and asked him how he knew her true identity. Yun raised his head and calmly pointed toward the tall tower in front of them, telling her that someone named Bok Mujan had told him. Yun then told her he was going to meet someone named Xiao Guangling, and the two began walking together toward their destination. As they walked, Hua Yun asked Yun curiously if he knew Bok Mujan well, to which Yun confidently and concisely replied yes. Hua Yun began to wonder to herself about Yun's true identity, especially since if he was a friend of Bok Mujan, then he was likely either a prominent disciple of the Sun Palace, or perhaps even the son of the palace master himself. Hua Yun stopped briefly, looking around at the scattered corpses, and asked Yun with concern if it was right to leave the place and the bodies like this, noting that Guan soldiers might arrive soon. She smiled with certainty and said that if things escalated, perhaps even the Sword King himself might intervene. Yun asked her in surprise if she meant the High Robe, and Hua Yun clarified that she meant Sangbok, the Sword King and master of Dongbong Fortress, though she doubted he'd interfere in something this minor. She continued, explaining that they still needed to be very cautious, since Guan soldiers were still trying to reach the level of the 6 kings of heaven and earth, and these events could trigger dangerous movements. She said the recent revolution in martial arts was heavily influenced by the recruitment of fighters from the Guan regions, despite their deep respect for the 6 kings, who had surpassed human limits, with the exception of the reckless boy standing before her. Yun was silent for a moment, then told her it was clear they had paid a lot of money to certain people to clean up this mess. Otherwise, things would be very different now. Yun smiled confidently and said he didn't see a trace of anyone around here, suggesting they should move quickly before being blamed for this chaos. Yun paused for a moment, staring at his sword stained with human blood. He thought to himself that he had fully drained his energy using the blood thief technique and could no longer freely wield his former power as he once did. He continued speaking to himself, realizing he wouldn't reach his goal quickly and would have to deal with what was within reach for now. Yun spoke to himself, stating that they were here for a clear reason, to deal with the blood demon, and that Li Huiyan was the one who crossed into enemy territory to capture this demon. While walking, Yun wondered why they were trying to capture that demon, and she calmly replied that the orders said he must be captured. When Yun asked her whom she meant, Hua Yun replied clearly that it referred to the chief of the Scarlet Dragon clan. She thought to herself that Yun wasn't planning to hide anything from her. She asked him with a smile if there was blood on his face, and when he answered no, she wondered why Bok Mujan told her to come here. She explained that Bok Mujan said the Bowmaster had asked him to send her, which made Yun slightly surprised when she mentioned the name Bowmaster, and he asked if that master was the same one who had fought the Heavenly Dragon clan in the past. Hua Yun confirmed that this was true, and that it was indeed him, from the Bow Fortress, according to what she had been told earlier regarding the current structure of the martial world. Yun and the mysterious Hua Yun began discussing the current political situation. She explained that the current factions were divided into 2 main groups, the Crusaders and the Heavenly Dragon Alliance. She went on to clarify that the Crusaders were aligned with the Ming clan, while the Heavenly Dragon Alliance was led by the Iron Emperor's Knights and the Eastern Elite Formation sect. As they walked together in the rain, Yun sarcastically wondered to himself how she could feel any loyalty to the Sun Master sect. Hua Yun responded with a calm smile, suggesting they ask the Cross Star Master why he gave such orders. Yun gently said he had expected her to be curious, and she jokingly laughed, replying that he was definitely a kind person. She then continued, explaining that there was one truth in today's martial world. The coffin is stronger than martial arts. Hua Yun clearly pointed out that even increasing the number of martyrs 100-fold would not enable them to stand against any of the 6 great royal families, let alone the imperial family itself. Yun said sadly that the martial world had clearly been exploited under the name of the Tri-System. The girl agreed with Yun's words, adding that true martial artists had not participated in the last Great War, which is why everyone now viewed them negatively. Yun expressed his frustration, explaining that strength in this world is mostly measured by the amount of blood spilled in past wars. He continued, recalling the days he wanted revenge, against those who just watched and didn't help, but he never acted on it. He added sorrowfully that all he did back then was feel pain and sadness. The girl explained to Yun that Guan had withdrawn from the martial world to achieve self-governance. She added that this situation closely resembled the current conflict between the Crusaders and the Heavenly Dragon Alliance. Yun seriously asked who, under these conditions, could control the Crusaders. The girl answered that only the Emperor or the royal family could do so. She also mentioned that the current leader of the Crusaders was a very cunning man who didn't hesitate to strengthen his power. She confirmed that this was precisely why her family had sent her to this place. She continued, explaining that her family was well aware of this, and that's why they had sent her here. Inside, Yun realized that the reason she followed him was because her Scarlet Dragon Juko clan clearly showed hostility toward her own family. She asked him if the information she had given was helpful, and Yun replied that it was somewhat helpful, causing her to respond with sarcastic disappointment. Yun thought to himself that he hadn't realized that an imperial or royal family directive was actually part of his plan. He wondered how the political system had survived this long, then concluded in his mind that he hadn't expected the political factions to be split between the Crusaders and the Heavenly Dragon Alliance as a way to divide them. Yun then began thinking deeply about the absence of any mention of Amshin, formerly known as T, and wondered what that might signify. Hua Yun returned to ask him clearly if she could capture the bleeding beast, affirming that she needed to do so. She also asked him to obtain the red spear and give it to her, and Yun promised he would consider it. Yun suddenly remembered that the bleeding beast had a red spear that looked like his old one, which deeply shocked him. Yun wondered if his red spear had fallen into the wrong hands, realizing that he had to meet that notorious beast. In the end, under the moonlight on a rainy night, their steps paused briefly on the blood-soaked ground, both of them serious and bracing for what was to come. Yun and Hua Yun stood in front of a large building on a rainy night when suddenly they heard a man's voice from inside, praising Yun's combat skills and saying that such abilities were rare to witness in Songchu. Yun gripped his sword tensely and asked sternly who that mysterious person was that had just spoken to him. The doors of the massive building suddenly swung open, and a large man appeared in the doorway, surrounded by a terrifying red aura. The large man smirked slyly and said it was rare to see a woman that beautiful in Songchu. Hua Yun responded calmly and sarcastically, saying that it was just as rare to see a man as hideous as him. The man coldly smiled, revealing the handle of his massive blade, and said that if he killed them now, they wouldn't get another chance to see his body. Yun remembered internally that he couldn't use much of his power. He could only muster 2 strikes of Heart of the Sun, which made him worry about whether he could defeat such a strong opponent. Hua Yun looked at him with a confident smile and told Yun not to worry, that it wouldn't be difficult for them together. The large man sneered at the idea of the two of them facing one person, accusing them of cowardice for not confronting him alone. Suddenly, a large number of men appeared and began surrounding Yun and Hua Yun, worsening the situation. They felt extremely uneasy due to the overwhelming aura and the scent of black blood filling the area, wondering where these forces had suddenly come from. Hua Yun asked Yun to stay behind her, explaining that they were surrounded and the situation was extremely dangerous. She said that escaping might be easy for her alone, but not while he was with her. Yun objected, saying it was arrogant of her to assume she could protect him. But Hua Yun confidently replied that she had seen him use all his strength during the previous red sword attack, and that it had drained his energy. The large man mocked them, saying they were clearly trapped and couldn't escape. Hua Yun offered Yun to close his eyes for a moment, as she was about to do something that might be too violent for him. The large man grinned maliciously and told the girl that she could leave if she wanted. They only wanted Yun's head, but Hua Yun ignored his words and asked if they could enter the building, which left him deeply confused. Hua Yun smiled sweetly and explained that she had 2 promises, an old promise and one that was made just a day ago. Her words made the large man uneasy, and he looked to his men in confusion, wondering about her true identity. Then she called out loudly for Yadodai Cheongmue. From the top of the tower, another large man appeared, laughing loudly and mocking the situation. Wondering who this Hua Yun was to seem so confident. The large man leapt from the top of the tower into the courtyard, smiling as he said that Hua Yun seemed to know him well. Hua Yun responded firmly, confirming that she did indeed know him, and revealed that she was the daughter of Li Guang, shocking everyone. Hua Yun clearly announced that she had come to fulfill an old promise between her and Cheongmue. The large man charged rapidly into the center of the courtyard, wielding a massive spear in preparation for battle. Silence fell for a moment after this dramatic entrance, and the tension was clearly visible among the surrounding men. Finally, the large man stood firmly in the center of the courtyard, ready for a fierce confrontation. In the past, Li Guang, known by the title the Luminous Dragon Tiger, would display his immense power by raising his glowing sword before his opponents. In contrast, Yado Daryang, the Left Blade King of the Black Cloud Society, appeared standing proudly, wielding a massive blade. Yado spoke confidently, saying that the roots of this conflict ran very deep, hinting that things were far more complicated than they seemed. In the present, Miu Yi's anger flared up violently upon hearing the name Guang, and he demanded that the speaker repeat what they said in a threatening tone. A girl standing in the background explained that this Guang was the same person who had killed her martial arts master and the entire squad, even Master Chao. Hua Yun also became enraged, calling him a scoundrel and expressing her hatred for him clearly. An angry Miu Yi stepped forward toward Hua Yun mockingly, saying this was the first time he'd heard that Guang had a mistress. Hua Yun confidently and firmly responded that she was no mistress, she was Li Guang's daughter. He burst into sarcastic laughter, saying his eyes must be deceiving him, as his followers joined in mocking Hua Yun's words. His men scoffed that this Hua Yun didn't look like his daughter at all, and laughed at her statement with ridicule and disdain. At that moment, Hua Yun stood her ground amidst their mockery, while they mocked her further, asking if she had lost her mind. But Hua Yun gave a calm smile and asked the warrior Chong Miu Yi if he was afraid. She went on to explain that she knew he was a coward who betrayed others behind their backs once the battles ended and their guards were lowered. The warrior began to grow angry and confused by her words, calling her a chatterbox. His followers erupted in fury, questioning why she was accusing their master of such vile things. One of them shouted in anger that he would never stab someone in the back, and that his spiritual father had already died, insisting on his honor. Another follower furiously demanded that Hua Yun be killed immediately, calling her an arrogant woman who didn't deserve to live. Miu Yi grew extremely angry and began preparing to take decisive action against Hua Yun. Yun, watching from a distance, said to himself that Hua Yun really was crazy, and expressed concern about how things were escalating. He thought to himself that a direct confrontation between the Luminous Dragon Clan and the Mukyung Society should have been stopped by the Master of Law from the beginning, and sarcastically wondered if this was exactly what Behemoth wanted. But the one called Behemoth calmly confirmed that he could not intervene, as these were the orders of the Northern Lord, Mozun. The Master of Law emphasized that this battle must be respected and not interfered with under any circumstances. Meanwhile, Miu Yi's anger intensified as he insisted that Hua Yun represented an enemy to his parents and master. On her part, Hua Yun was fiercely determined and appeared fully prepared to face this dangerous challenge. As violent clashes erupted once again on the battlefield, the sounds of combat and clashing swords echoed through the air. Li Guang unleashed his glowing sword and darted toward his enemies at lightning speed, executing a devastating and incredibly fast attack. He demonstrated exceptional swordsmanship, causing massive chaos among the enemy ranks. In response, Yado Daryang launched a fiery counterattack, leaping from above and aiming a crushing blow at Guang. His fiery strike caused a massive explosion that shook the battlefield, leaving those nearby stunned by its force. In a final confrontation, one of the fighters remarked seriously that what was happening now was merely an old cycle repeating endlessly. The final clash erupted with tremendous speed and power between the two main opponents, leaving everyone anxiously awaiting the outcome of this decisive battle. The intense clash between the two men escalated as Yado Dairang lunged forward with a sudden movement toward Li Guang, swinging his sword and generating a powerful gust of wind. Li Guang narrowly evaded the strike, retreating at incredible speed while the blow left a deep mark on the ground. He quickly regained his balance and prepared to launch an even stronger strike, while his opponent braced himself to block the new attack. A glowing blue aura ignited around Li Guang's body, revealing his overwhelming inner power as he advanced to strike again. Yado Dairang was greatly surprised by Li Guang's speed and strength, realizing the fight had become far more dangerous than he had expected. A confident, defiant smile appeared on his face, showing his enjoyment of the battle despite its difficulty. But that smile soon turned to shock when he suddenly sensed Li Guang's powerful energy closing in on him unexpectedly. The two paused briefly, staring intensely at one another as each sized up his opponent with full concentration. Yado Dairang regained his confidence and gripped his sword tightly, ready to unleash a fierce counterattack. Their strikes collided with tremendous force, triggering a deafening explosion that filled the arena with blinding light and stirred up a powerful storm. From afar, a bald man was hiding behind a tree, watching the battle with deep fear and anxiety, muttering nervously to himself. "My lord!" Miu Yi, the bald man, continued watching the scene as the violent fight raged on, with the two men's strikes growing increasingly devastating. He asked himself fearfully and trembling where the northern Mo region was, remembering that his master had told him to summon someone named Bimo Zhang. But before he could finish his sentence, a sudden sound from behind made him turn around in sheer terror. At that moment, a sharp sword pierced Yado Dairang's body in a brutal and unexpected strike, causing blood to gush out violently. Li Guang stood calmly and firmly, while his opponent fell to the ground with fatal wounds before the horrified eyes of the bald man. Li Guang dropped his sword to the ground, visibly exhausted, muttering with difficulty that he had used up all his strength. Miu Yi began to tremble in fear and shock, whispering that his master couldn't possibly die such a pitiful death. Li Guang stood alone in the space, now filled with the scent of blood, struggling to catch his breath after the battle's end. But suddenly, the bald man appeared behind him, shouting loudly as he called out to his master and charged desperately at Li Guang. Indeed, Miu Yi lunged at Li Guang in a fit of rage, screaming that he would avenge his recently slain master. In the present, Miu Yi furiously asked Hua Yun how she knew every detail of what happened, even though the body had been completely disposed of. She appeared before him, calmly staring at him, saying she didn't know how much that bald man actually knew. A terrifying dark aura ignited from Miu Yi, declaring that anything dangerous must be completely destroyed as he began to prepare for an attack. Hua Yun quietly asked if he didn't intend to deny the accusation against him. Miu Yi coldly replied that he didn't need to answer such trivial matters. He threatened clearly while brandishing his weapon that what was obvious to him was that Li Guang could never have had a daughter like her. Hua Yun froze for a moment, wounded by his words, and softly repeated in sorrow, "He has no daughter." At that moment, Yun stood beside Hua Yun, wondering to himself if this time it was his turn to step aside while she faced her own battle. And in the end, Hua Yun removed her cloak, firmly preparing herself for the fateful fight ahead. The scene began with a serious look from Yun as he felt the weight of the moment and realized he was now directly targeted by his enemies. He recalled the time when a red banner fluttered fiercely in the air, a banner Yun believed should never fall on the battlefield. The banner suddenly crashed onto the battlefield with force, creating a dramatic scene. Yet the banner of the Heavenly Northern Commander had always stood firm and unbroken. A warrior carrying the banner approached Yun and asked loudly whether they had truly won the battle. Yun replied with the smile of a victor, affirming that they had achieved a great triumph, calling the warrior by name Chung Am. Chung Am smiled joyfully, thanking Yun deeply for this magnificent victory. Yun remembered Chung Am with great respect and appreciation, stating that he had been the best warrior among them, and that he couldn't even use his weapon to its fullest because he had been carrying the banner. An image appeared of a powerful combat style known as the Grand Heavenly Storm Art, a technique developed specifically for this battle. Yun wondered in his mind as he watched the scene if all these events were tied to some destined fate, recalling the alias used by the mysterious Hua Yun, Scarlet Dragon Juko. He thought about Hua Yun and their shared fate, questioning internally whether it was these very events that had brought them to this point. At that moment, Hua Yun charged into the battle with tremendous force, swinging her long red sleeves in a surprise assault. She struck the enemy with great power, releasing intense combat energy that forced the massive opponent to retreat. Miu Yi, the large man, spoke in a calm yet firm tone, explaining to the girl that martial arts must be used at their peak, or else they will quickly collapse. Yun watched the battle from a distance with deep concern, realizing that despite her strength, Hua Yun had not yet reached even half the power that Li Guang possessed. Hua Yun continued with determined focus, telling herself that she had to kill him with this technique, no matter the cost. Miu Yi smiled confidently and declared that if he could just hold out a little longer, victory would be his. Hua Yun charged again with great power and resolve, declaring she would make it unbearable for him. The enemy shouted as he blocked her strike, pointing out that she was still young and lacked enough experience. But suddenly the opponent was struck directly and unexpectedly by Hua Yun's technique, leaving him utterly shocked. Miu Yi was launched into the air from the powerful blow dealt by Hua Yun, clearly signaling her superiority. Yun was stunned by Hua Yun's strength, and his heart began to race as he admitted to himself that he had been ready to flee if things had taken a darker turn. He noticed that Hua Yun had compensated for her lack of physical power by mastering the red sleeve fighting style, and wondered silently just how skilled she truly was. Miu Yi collapsed to his knees, screaming in pain as his men called out to him in fear and concern. He screamed from the pain, warning his followers not to come any closer, demanding that they retreat immediately. The opponent stood with great difficulty and praised Hua Yun's strength, admitting he never expected a woman to possess such combat skills. Hua Yun looked at him coldly and said clearly and bluntly that she would kill him, declaring that she had survived the horrors of the forest. Miu Yi was stunned by her mention of the forest, insisting in great confusion that there had been no one in that forest. He insisted on killing Hua Yun at that very moment, despite his men's efforts to stop him and keep him from going near her. His men tried to convince him that she wasn't worth all the trouble and risk, but he refused to listen, stubbornly holding to his decision. Miu Yi seriously asked his men whether the people around them were truly all allies, in an attempt to assess the situation more clearly. One of the men called out nervously from a distance, pointing out that the Northern Combat Master was up above and a dark energy was clearly surrounding him. Miu Yi responded confidently, saying the situation was under control and there was no need to worry. Then suddenly, Seo Cheon's expression changed as he urgently told Yun to run, leaving Yun shocked by the sudden warning. At that moment, Miu Yi, surrounded by black energy, charged toward Hua Yun, moving at superhuman speed using a mysterious power. His strength surged dramatically, and he became enveloped in a terrifying purple aura, suggesting he was using a forbidden technique. The purple aura began expanding around him in a horrifying way, revealing a power far beyond human limits. His muscles started swelling and transforming grotesquely, with the cracking of bones clearly audible. Yun watched with deep concern, realizing that this mysterious technique was the Western Chain Curse, a forbidden spell once used in ancient wars to control slaves and beasts. The terrifying man laughed quietly and muttered to himself sarcastically, "It's been a long time," as his eyes gleamed with a dreadful energy. Hua Yun stepped forward, horrified, trying to stop the man, once she realized he had used the forbidden madness charm. Miu Yi responded with a mocking smile, admitting he hadn't wanted to use the technique, but was forced to, and then clearly declared that her time to die had come. He leapt high into the air, diving toward Hua Yun while screaming furiously, ready to strike her with deadly force. Hua Yun tried to defend herself using her long red sleeves in a swift motion to shield herself, but the terrifying man easily broke through her defense using his immense power, sending her crashing violently to the ground. Hua Yun hit the ground hard and was severely injured. The man mocked her, saying she was far too weak despite all her previous talk. At that moment, she looked at him and asked furiously how many people he had to kill in order to master that madness charm. Miu Yi looked toward Yun with a confident smile and told him his turn would come after he finished with Hua Yun first. Then he'd take care of him next. Energy flared strongly in Yun's chest as it became clear he was preparing to face the man using his powerful solar energy. Miu Yi smiled wickedly and said sarcastically that he admired Yun's courage and wished he had met him earlier. Yun calmly and confidently replied that if they had met earlier, today would be remembered as the anniversary of Miu Yi's death. The terrifying man grinned with pleasure at Yun's words and said confidently that he truly had guts. Meanwhile, Yun realized that the spell his opponent was using was a low-level version of the madness curse from the West, and he inwardly scoffed at such a weak method. Miu Yi sneered and said Ji Chunhyuk was arrogant, but far too weak as a human, then told Yun to wait just a little longer. He then pointed at Hua Yun, who was still lying on the ground, and mockingly told her that her turn had come. Yun thought to himself that his solar energy was desperate to tear apart this evil curse, but he sensed that this spell was different from typical black magic. Miu Yi began to advance toward Hua Yun with steady, terrifying steps, while Yun felt a growing sense of uncertainty, as if there was something more about this forbidden technique he still didn't know. He approached Hua Yun with imposing dread, and she lay helpless on the ground beneath his overwhelming power. At that moment, Miu Yi told her that she could still call for help from the young master. But Hua Yun firmly and clearly declared that her turn was not over. She could still fight. Yun turned with a serious and alert expression, preparing himself for the next confrontation. Hua Yun began mocking Miu Yi, questioning whether he truly believed gaining strength through restricted curses made him genuinely powerful. The dark energy around Miu Yi intensified as he responded mockingly, saying he didn't care for lectures or meaningless words. Then he charged toward Hua Yun with destructive force, telling her he only knew one thing. He added with biting sarcasm that he could easily crush arrogant people like her, while Hua Yun calmly observed the situation and called it a disgrace. Miu Yi taunted Hua Yun provocatively, demanding she come to him, declaring he would stand still just to humiliate someone like her. Yun stood quietly in the rain, thinking to himself that surrendering the initiative was part of his plan, and that using high-level martial arts didn't always guarantee victory. The opponent mocked Hua Yun, saying he would tell her what Yu Chong's sword Li Guang said before he died. Hua Yun, preparing to strike, shouted angrily that someone like him wasn't even worthy of saying Li Guang's name. Miu Yi gave a terrifying smile and declared it was unfortunate she had already lost to someone like him, revealing that he used to be called the General. Hua Yun cried out powerfully as she prepared to attack, saying her father bore the banner of the great Northern General, but the opponent cut her off sharply, telling her to stop the nonsense. Hua Yun then shouted urgently for the guards to come help her in this dire moment. Miu Yi spoke with mockery, explaining that during the unification period, the strength of the warrior army was invincible, and he questioned how someone like Li Guang could carry the banner if he wasn't a peak-level fighter. But Hua Yun confidently affirmed that what happened was a special case. Yun began to feel some doubt, thinking to himself that Li Guang was definitely at peak level, but then the opponent interrupted, scoffing at calling someone of an ordinary level a general. Yun recalled again that he wasn't entirely sure how Li Guang or Chunggum disappeared, and he began to suspect that even the army's leadership at that time seemed suspicious now. Mu Yi, with a confident smile, said he had given Hua Yun enough time to recover her strength and told her it was time to move. Hua Yun gathered all her strength, using the martial technique inherited from her father, and declared with determination that she would take his life now. Mu Yi smiled challengingly, remarking that if words were enough, he would have been torn to pieces long ago. Hua Yun charged at her opponent with all her power and fury in one final attempt to end the battle. She unleashed a terrifying combat technique, with her red energy forming the image of a massive, fearsome face lunging with tremendous force. Yun rushed in quickly, but realized that what Hua Yun was doing wouldn't be enough to stop the opponent, and that the situation had become hopeless. A massive, bolt-shaped energy force surged from behind the opponent as Yun continued moving fast to try and prevent the coming disaster. The opponent struck down from above with enormous power, attempting to completely crush Hua Yun. The impact caused a massive explosion of destructive energy, creating a violent shockwave across the battlefield. From a distance, the Master of Law sat silently watching the battle, his expression unreadable. Then he remarked that the person he was told would appear hadn't shown up yet. He continued with clear sadness and frustration, saying only others kept appearing instead. Finally, behind him, a dark and mysterious figure emerged, radiating a terrifying aura, with glowing red eyes that heightened the tension dramatically.